The following program is an MLWRadio.com production.
Welcome to Something to Wrestle With. Bruce Prichard.
Well, you know. That's not a rib. She booted. No, yeah, but there's no box of gimmicks.
Rumor and innuendo.
I don't deal in rumor and innuendo. And was he there? I was there. I don't give a shit. I ain't scared.
I ain't scared of shit.
Fuck him.
You, Bruce.
I love you take the cheese. Double cheeseburger. You take the bread. Well, you know. And then double man. You know, it's called chicken salad. Double onion.
You're nothing but an egg-sucking dog.
Throw it in your Google machine.
Goddamn, kid. Goddamn it. What the hell show you got there? I need more. Yeah.
What say you?
Pronouns, pal.
And now, something to wrestle with. Con Bruce Prichard. The second most recognizable athlete in the entire world today. Conrad Thompson.
What happened when? What would Vince say about that?
Well, hey, Vince, to the my shoulders look good tonight. Yeah. It's so big. Yeah. Let's go.
Bullshit.
Welcome to Wrestle. Man.
World title now.
Welcome to Something to Wrestle With.
Something to wrestle with.
Something to wrestle with. Bruce Prichard. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Something to Wrestle With. Bruce Prichard. Bruce, what's going on, man? How are you?
I am absolutely great. How in the hell are you doing in Alabama? You haven't got blown away by all these damn tropical storms and everything.
Well, I tell you, man, it's been quite a week. First of all, we should probably go ahead and thank everybody for coming out to our show this past weekend in Baltimore, just before Money in the Bank. I got to say, man, I had a blast. It's always overwhelming to see the level of support we get from you guys and to meet our listeners. If I'm honest, it's just kind of humbling that all of you wanted to spend your Father's Day with us. It's just a happy accident, man. I'm just a fan. I really appreciate all the support that you guys are putting out there. Bruce and I are having a good time, and we're so thankful that you're digging what we're doing and for coming to see us. Bruce, what'd you think?
I absolutely thought it was amazing. This was one show where I didn't really know what to expect because it was in kind of a different venue, and we had that great radio station there helping us out, and Dave Green helping us out. But it was overwhelming, the response and the people that turned out, and they seemed happy, and I got a lot of response back on Twitter. So thank you, St. Louis. Thank you, everybody at the South Broadway Athletic Club. Thank you, Dave Green, Joe, everybody involved, man. It was a good weekend. Yeah, special thanks to 590 The Fan right there in St. Louis. KFNS, Joe, and all the fine crew over there hooked us up. And we appreciate the hospitality, and I look forward to going back to St. Louis sometime soon. It wasn't the easiest trip getting there, but we'll save that story for another time. Any follow-up for last week's episode, Bruce? Don't blame me, man. I voted for Sherry is all I got to say. And that t-shirt is available now over at brucepritchard.com. It's worth mentioning that whenever you pick up a shirt, Bruce Prichard will call you. So there's been lots of people wanting to know, how do I talk to Bruce? How do I get Bruce on the phone? Well, that's easy. Go to brucepritchard.com, pick up a shirt, and Bruce is going to give you a ring. Check out the new Blockamania shirt in honor of the time Hulk Hogan blocked me. You've also got Don't Blame Me. I voted for Sherry. Bad News. Shit Happens. Dick Was Everywhere. Salad Steel Cage. And more. Check it out right now over at brucepritchard.com. I do feel like we should also shout out our buddy, Justin Roberts. I guess he's my buddy now. He finally got the audio version of his book released. If you haven't already, go check it out at justinrobertsbook.com. And in 2 weeks, man, we are back on the road again. Bruce and I are going to be joined by Tony Schiavone, and we're going to discuss his year in the WWF, the 1989 SummerSlam, and of course, some Monday Night Wars action. We aren't taping this. It won't be released. No, we're not putting it out there for you to download. Instead, you've got to come join us
as Bruce likes to say, and all old people do, live and in living color on July 9th in Dallas, right before Great Balls of Fire. And what a phenomenal card that's shaping up to be. An ambulance match with Braun Strowman and Roman Reigns. And then, of course, in the main event, Samoa Joe and Brock Lesnar. But the real main event is going to be the superpowers from What Happened When and Something to Wrestle coming together on stage. Tony Schiavone, Bruce Prichard, don't miss it. We've got some hilarious stuff planned. I can't believe that one of these stunts, I haven't even told you about this one yet, Bruce. I'll tell you off air, but I got a commitment for something that I never thought would happen, and it's happening, and you can be a part of that happening at 3 links. Right now, cruise on over to WHWLive.com. That's WHWLive.com. And now, in like 3 weeks, Bruce is going to be all over the place. On the 15th, he'll be in Dublin. And then on the 16th, 17th, and 18th, you can catch him all over the UK, Birmingham, Manchester, and London. And don't forget, July 23rd, we're getting extreme in Philadelphia right before Battleground. And you can keep up with all the details on these shows and everywhere else we go at Facebook.com/something to wrestle. And all right, Bruce, it's time. What happened when John Cena became a WWE superstar? Before we get started, man, let's talk about, I guess, where John Cena is now as far as his legacy in professional wrestling business. You were with him up till the end of 2008, and we're going to cover through WrestleMania 20 in 2004 here today. But let's talk just a second. Where do you think John Cena's place in professional wrestling will be?
I think that when you talk about the greats of the WWF and the true stars, I think that Cena's going to be right up there with Hulk Hogan, Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, and John Cena.
Yeah, it's hard to argue that he's not on that Mount Rushmore of WWE as far as the length of the run he's had. Whether you're a fan or not, to me, doesn't really matter. It's about the position the company has entrusted him with, and he's kind of carried that banner for so long. But let's kind of start at the beginning. John Cena has always been an overachiever. I say that because he was born with 4 names, John Felix Anthony Cena, born on April 23rd, 1977 in West Newbury, Massachusetts. And Cena has that whole never give up thing. Man, that thing's been since birth. He was born with the umbilical cord wrapped around his neck 3 times and in 3 knots, but he never gave up, even as a fetus. Did you hear that story before, Bruce? That was all over a WWE DVD, and I got to say, considering his never give up persona, it cracked me up.
His dad actually told me that story and just how John was a miracle, by God. It wasn't that he caught a ball with one eye, but it was a miracle that John survived that. So, yeah, I'd heard that story from his father.
For the record, if you could actually catch a ball with one eye, that would be a miracle.
I know. It's absolutely just biblical.
Well, I'm not going to get crazy. He is the second of 5 brothers. He's got 4 other brothers, of course, Dan, Sean, Steve, and Matt. And they grew up as wrestling fans. And Cena's dad actually admits that they only got cable because of professional wrestling. So they very much grew up in a wrestling household. And John, even as a kid, was planning wrestling matches in the basement with his 2 brothers. He would, kind of make their own family set of belts. And then they used mattresses as the ring. And they were all like big tape collectors. So they would tape wrestling every time it was on TV or pay-per-view. How big of a deal do you think this is as far as the success of a professional wrestler that he was a big fan as a kid? Because it feels like some of the guys that we hear about a lot now, whether it's a Seth Rollins or even back in the day, it was a Mick Foley, and then kind of in between with John Cena, they grew up as huge wrestling fans. There's old pictures of Shawn Michaels kind of trying to emulate Ric Flair. How critical is it, do you think, to getting to that next level of wrestling superstar if you were a wrestling fan as a kid?
Well, I think that if you have the passion and it's something that you truly want to do and you truly want to be and you dreamt about it as a kid, it makes all of the difference in your desire and your willingness to do whatever it takes to succeed in the business. And that's something that John has always had. He was a fan, and it's all he ever wanted to do since he was a small kid was be a wrestler.
Is it fair to say that a guy like John Cena had to be, or not had to be, but probably needed to be a super fan. But a guy like Brock Lesnar, because of just his physical stature, he was going to be a big deal no matter what, because we hear about guys like Brock who didn't grow up as a big wrestling fan, but now they're at the top of the heap.
Well, I think that Brock brings a different set of talents to the game, and Brock does not, admittedly, have the same passion as a John Cena for the business. To Brock, it is simply business, and it ends to a means. But both are extremely successful, so you can't argue with it.
Well, of course, the Cena we see now is Super Cena. But if you do a little research, you'll see that Cena was bullied as a kid, and the kids were actually beating him up. So he wanted to start lifting weights, and then one year actually asked his dad for a weight set for Christmas. And then he became obsessed. He worked at it every day. And then at the age of 15, he met the owner of the Hard Knocks gym, Dave Knock. They hit it off, and Dave would push Cena to lift to the point of throwing up and bursting blood vessels in both eyes. Dave himself was a former bodybuilder, and this inspired Cena to really work at it. And so before, he decided he wanted to kind of double down on this, he would start working out 3 times a day. And it became his obsession. But Cena wasn't always the outward guy that we know now. Once upon a time, he was a pretty shy guy. So before his first bodybuilding tournament, Dave Knock actually made him go to the center of the town wearing his bikini bottoms and do his pose routine right in the middle of the town, and then walk down the sidewalk in the outfit. He did this, of course, to kind of get John over his nerves of being on stage in this little bikini bottom. And it did the trick. And now, all these years later, it's hard to imagine a shy version of John Cena. Did you ever meet Dave Knock? This guy seems like he's been a critical part of John Cena's life, very influential.
I've met him through the years, but never really had any conversation with him. I know who he is. I've said hello, but that's about it. He's a friend of Cena's and somebody that he really looks up to and does credit with kind of where he is and getting him out of his shell.
We're talking about the enthusiasm for working out is something that John Cena has, kind of been aligned with for a long time. And we as wrestling fans heard a few years back that the guy on the road he likes to train with when they're on the road together is Cesaro, because they both like to lift heavy. Do you know of any fun or interesting gym stories of John Cena and some of the other superstars?
I think Cena's always trying to outdo not only everybody else, but he's always trying to outdo himself. And he's one of those guys that gets into the gym and is trying to break whatever silly record that he can possibly come up with. But he's a hard worker. Well, I'll wait till we get there the first time that I ever met Cena and give you the advice that I gave him. But he lived to work out. He lived to train and lived to build his body.
Well, he did that bodybuilding competition that we talked about, and he got second place. Allegedly, according to Dave Knock, the judges assumed that he was cheating and using drugs, and they gave him second place. That's Dave Knock's story. He did have to, this is worth mentioning because there's been lots of rumor and innuendo out there, John Cena did have to pass a polygraph there in order to compete, and he did pass. And at 16 or 17, he looked like a professional bodybuilder. He did play football in high school and then actually chose to go to Springfield College. He chose there because of their reputation for health and fitness, and they were just cranking out personal trainers, which is obviously something that Cena was very, very interested in. And Cena has always kind of positioned himself as a leader. His coach and other players that he would play with on the football team would say that he would give motivational speeches to the rest of the offensive line that would give the guys chills. So he was the leader in the huddle of the games, not the quarterback, the offensive lineman, John Cena. And he used this motivation and drive and focus to become an All-American. And allegedly, if you believe his friends, they would say that Cena didn't study, but he did fine in school. He would joke about sleeping with his book under his pillow and having a lucky pencil. He was just one of those guys who, for whatever reason, had it and didn't have to put in a lot of effort in that regard. During the bodybuilding competition that he would, traditionally try to enter into, he would continually get references to his calves, that he needed to work on his calves. So one of the things he tried to do is actually cut his pants into shorts. So he would continually have to look at his calves all the time as a reminder to work out on them. And he did. He would work out in the morning, he'd work out in the afternoon, and he'd work out in the evening. And then, of course, eventually after college, he decides, hey, man, I want to continue this bodybuilding. So he moved to California, which, Bruce, you can catch us up on this. Historically, most of the big bodybuilders came from Venice Beach, California, and that area, which is one of the reasons so many of the wrestlers, you know, their gimmick was that they were from Venice Beach, California, brother. Isn't that right?
Well, yeah, and that's where everybody wanted to work out, because if you worked out in Muscle Beach, man, you got seen. People came by, and that was a spot where Schwarzenegger and a lot of Hollywood types would be, and they would go and work out, and they went there to be seen. So they would work out, they would show their bodies off, they would try and show their personalities off and get noticed and try to become the next big thing.
So, you know, this is 1998 now, and he's in California. He's just graduated from Springfield College with a degree in exercise physiology, and he's trying to get a career going in bodybuilding. So none of that pays the bills. So instead, he works as a driver for a limousine company. Hey, this brings up a good question, Bruce. Do you remember the last time you bought a car? So, of course, John Cena is hanging and banging at the Gold's Gym in California one day when two wrestlers come in all of a sudden. How about this? It's funny that some of these happy accidents happen like this. Mad Dog Mike Bell and his brother Smelly, who's been on Austin's podcast before, approached him and asked if he had ever considered pro wrestling. And they invited him to come down and do a tryout at the school. And then Cena reports back to his dad that the first time he got in the ring, he knew that's what he wanted to do. And he really dedicated himself, just as he has to everything else. He'd go to work every day, then he'd go to the gym, then he'd go to the wrestling school, then he'd go home. Rinse, lather, repeat every single day. And he's doing this while he's living in a garage apartment and only making 30, 40, 50 bucks a show working the independents. His gimmick, of course, Bruce, do you remember the gimmick? Tell us about the gimmick, the prototype.
I am Prototype. He had a flat top haircut, bleach blonde hair, and dark sunglasses, and was trying to be somewhat of a hybrid between the Terminator and I don't know what the hell else. But I first met John Cena at the Roxy in Hollywood.
Really?
Yes. And I was there with Rick Bassman, and Bassman says, hey, I want to introduce you to one of my new trainees. This guy's going to be really big. He's got a great attitude, so on and so forth. And Rick had instructed Cena how to introduce himself and how to be around me instead of just being himself.
Real quick, let's talk about Rick Bassman for a minute. Rick Bassman is running UPW, Ultimate Pro Wrestling. It's in California, and this is 1999 or so, would you say, Bruce? That's when he first started out there with Rick, I think. And Rick Bassman is probably, right. Rick is most famous probably for introducing the wrestling world to the Ultimate Warrior and Sting. Would you agree with that? Yes.
Power Team USA, which was himself, Sting, Ultimate Warrior, and one other gentleman.
But multiple other guys have kind of been discovered by Rick Bassman. The Miz, Chris Masters, Luther Reigns, Nathan Jones, John Heidenreich, on and on. John Cena is another guy on that list. Anyway, continue your story.
So John came down, and we met in a hallway with John coming down a set of stairs, and Rick introduced me, and he says, hello, I am Prototype. Kind of like that, like not, hey, my name's John. It's hello, I am Prototype. And I looked at him, and he was huge. And I said, if you want to make it in the business, get off the gas, kid. And I kept walking because I felt that him introducing himself as his gimmick name, and he looked huge. It looked like he was chemically enhanced, and for, 8 years, John Cena held that comment against me.
If you want to make it in the business, kid, get off the gas.
Yeah, because he had done and been competing in all these all natural competitions and had all the tests to prove that he was clean and natural and had worked so hard and so on and so forth. And I didn't realize that bothered him until many years later when he sat down and told me. And I apologized for it because once I got to know him, you saw what he was all about and how hard he did work. But that was
So let me get a couple things straight here. Number one, the Bell brothers are responsible for getting John Cena interested in becoming a professional wrestler.
I think John always wanted to be a professional wrestler since he was a kid, and running into the Bell brothers and them seeing him going, hey, you'd make a great wrestler, definitely helped that process along. But they're the ones that introduced him to UPW and the wrestling school out there in California.
Let's talk
Great
about
guys, by the way.
Let's talk about that for a minute. We've touched on the Bell brothers briefly before in the archives, but tell us a little bit about the Bell brothers.
Well, Mad Dog Mike Bell, I think they're also from Boston, or they're from Massachusetts as well. But Mike was a enhancement talent for the WWF for many, many years, and he also worked some for ECW. But I think you would kind of classify him as a journeyman wrestler. And his brother, Smelly, had moved out to California to do bodybuilding, but also to try and get into the movies. So Mike went out there. Mike was trying to do stunt work, and Mike was trying to do some movie stuff. And they were just a really close-knit family, and you really couldn't ask for two better guys that truly loved the business. Mike wanted so badly to be successful in the business. We tried a few different times with him, but Vince couldn't get over the stigma of being that enhancement guy.
Unfortunately, Mike passed away at 37 years old in a rehab facility. He died of a heart attack that was brought on from huffing dust off the thing you used to clean your keyboard. That happened in December of 2008. His brother, though, as he mentioned, Chris Bell, is the guy who put together Bigger, Faster, Stronger, and Prescription Thugs. Bigger, Faster, Stronger was pretty controversial at the time in the wrestling business. It came out in 2008, and then Prescription Thugs, I think, came out a couple of years ago, all about opioid addiction and so forth. Both of those, if you're even a casual wrestling fan, are interesting because of what we've heard over the years about the abuse of steroids and prescription drugs in professional wrestling. So shout out to him for that. Let's talk about Rick Bassman. Do you have any fun or interesting Rick Bassman stories? This seems like kind of an old school way of doing things, back in the day, and I guess this still exists, but back in the day, you didn't have the internet. So you had scouts who would kind of go around and look for the next big thing in baseball. And these baseball scouts would stumble across these finds, and then it would become, this great story. And Rick Bassman kind of seems like a throwback to that. And when you run through the list of guys he's put in the business, specifically The Miz, Sting, Ultimate Warrior, John Cena, I mean, those are some pretty big damn names.
Well, you look at Bassman. Bassman was placed in the right place in Southern California there. So you had people who wanted to be movie stars, wanted to be television stars, looking to break in. And you have big guys that are looking for shots. And Bassman positioned himself as an agent that could get them acting gigs on the side, whether it be commercials or bit parts in movies, and positioned himself as a representative of big, unique-looking guys to the movie studios. So some of these unique characters would come in, and if they needed, big wrestler type A for a television commercial, they would usually call Rick Bassman, and he would pick from his cast of characters that he had there training at UPW, send them down and get them acting gigs. So Rick helped them while they were training, getting them good Hollywood gigs. And if Rick saw something in them, Rick would usually try and sign them up to a contract where if they got a deal with another company, that he would get paid a percentage off of that after the fact. And that caused a lot of controversy later on in our relationship.
It's worth mentioning that another guy pops by UPW. He actually makes his wrestling debut in December of 99, and in early 2000 finds his way to Rick Bassman and Ultimate Pro Wrestling. Bassman decides, hey, this guy would be a good opponent for John Cena, and they start to feud. His name, Samoa Joe. It's just funny how all of this kind of comes about. Let's talk about the prototype a little bit more. Because the gimmick, at least the way it's been described, was 50% man, 50% machine, 100% mayhem. In your head, was that character designed or created by John Cena or Rick Bassman?
I think it was a combination of both from my recollection. I just thought it was hokey as hell. I didn't like it, but there was, I didn't like John's work at UPW, and I didn't like the gimmick per se, but I fell in love with John Cena, the guy that was portraying the true John Cena. John used to give me a ride back and forth to my hotel from training when I used to go out there and scout talent, and just listening to his passion and the way that he would ask questions. He was very, very, very respectful. And he had just such a strong desire to succeed. So that kind of drew me in to want to help him all that much more.
So when Cena is, working this prototype character for UPW, you can actually see him on a show called Inside Pro Wrestling, which was put out there by the Discovery Channel. And, it wasn't exactly the most well-received documentary, simply because at that time, people still wanted to kind of control the narrative. I guess they still do, about the way wrestling's presented. Do you remember this Inside Pro Wrestling program on the Discovery Channel?
Oh yeah, I sure do. That was, they set it up so that the cameras would be there. I think Tom and I went out, or JR and I went out to a show one time, and they wanted to show me making notes during a show and all kinds of crazy stuff. But I definitely remember the documentary, and it was just the stereotypical documentary that was done at that time.
Any thoughts on UPW? We've talked a little bit about Bassman. We talked a little bit about the Bell Brothers, but what did you think of UPW as an independent organization?
I thought that the wrestling was lackluster, but here's the thing about UPW. We used UPW as a training ground, a different place for guys to go. And we had Memphis, we had Louisville, we had Florida, we had a group in Massachusetts, and we had California, and Cincinnati. But they were all different. And I think that for the guys that we would send to California, in a lot of respects, it was almost for them to go and learn there, get in front of a different audience, because Rick drew good houses to his big shows. I mean, he got in front of people. And we would always tell guys, go there, train, learn, but you would have to deprogram them after they left there, if you know what I mean. It was kind of a place to send people to show them what not to do.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's valuable sometimes to be able to let guys see, this isn't the way that we do it, but I want you to see other things. And that was kind of UPW. But they were invaluable in that they presented us with a great wealth of talent for us to look at, raw talent. And I could ask Rick Bassman to get me a casting call today, and he would have, 100 people for me to look at tomorrow.
Well, I mean, it's good that you still think so highly of him, since you just shit all over his promotion. Cena won.
Promotion. They did well. They drew well. I just didn't think that their wrestling and their training was what we needed. They trained a different way.
Cena won the UPW heavyweight title from Smelly Bell in April 2000. He held it for 27 days and then dropped it back to Bell and left the company in 2001. But he did return to UPW for one night in 2003 and lost to Frankie Kazarian by DQ. I assume that you guys allowed him to come back in 03 just as a favor to Bassman, just to pop a house.
Exactly.
So look, something you mentioned earlier, I want to kind of circle back to. You just said the first time you met John Cena, you said, if you want to be in the business, get off the gas, kid, and kept it moving. So technically you had an opportunity to sign John Cena, but you didn't see it and Jim Ross did. Tell us why Jim Ross is the best in talent relations of all time and you sucked.
Easy there, Tiger. When I met John Cena at the Roxy nightclub. He was dressed. He had just started. I'd never seen him in the ring. And first impression was first impression. After several times of going to UPW and seeing John and seeing his work in the ring and seeing how he was progressing and being around him outside of the ring with his guard down and not, just trying to be on his P's and Q's, I found that, hey, there's something here. And we had a show in California. We did TV. Jim Ross came out early. Jim did not come out just to meet with John Cena. And Jim came out and said, let's go to the UPW show, and I'll show you some of the guys that we're interested in. And John was one of those guys that we were interested in. So we signed John and a few others. But the funny part about that was, I'll never forget, sending John his contract, and he called me and said, I got a scholarship to Springfield College to play football. And my dad was really proud of me. He says, but my dad cried when I called him and told him I got a WWF contract. He says, because that's been my goal my whole life, and it's kind of been my dad's goal as well. And that owned me at that point. So we send him in right there that day. It's like you sign your contract and you have to go in and do your tests that day. And part of those tests are your drug test, your blood test, all the other health stuff that the talent has to go through. And John passed everything with flying colors. So we were in Los Angeles at Staples Coliseum, Staples Arena. And I will never forget it. Cena comes back. He signed his contract. His tests come back. He's clean as a whistle. And Vince walks up to me and says, get that walking, talking steroid billboard out of our backstage. I'm like, who? That guy. And he's pointing out Cena. I said, Vince, we just signed him. God damn. And I said, his test came back and he's completely clean. Oh. All right. God damn. And Vince made the initial assumption, I think, that everybody made whenever they saw John, especially back in those days, because he was doing commercials for Gold's Gym and he was ripped to shreds. But that was Vince's first impression of John Cena, walking, talking steroid billboard.
So Jim Ross's version of the story is that he saw a tape of the prototype and then made a trip out to UPW. Flew out to see him, and then he met with John after and signed him. JR says when he came back to Stamford, he told McMahon, quote, I just signed your WrestleMania main event in 5 years. And he says that he was very excited for the athlete, but more excited to have signed the person that he believed John to be. He described Cena as mature, classy, and had a great work ethic. But as a wrestler, of course, he was raw, unrefined, and very green. Do you remember this whole, he's your WrestleMania main event in 5 years?
I don't, but I do remember, Jim was high on him because he was an athlete and he had played college football, and he was truly classy, respectful, and came across as a genuinely good guy. So we were high. We were higher on the person than we were the talent in the ring at that time, because we knew that we could train him.
So he gets signed and he comes to OVW. Tell us a little bit about OVW at the time. Who's running it? What's Jim Cornette's role? I know Kevin Kelly was there. I'm not sure when Paul Heyman came in. I don't know that he was there yet, but tell us a little bit about Danny Davis and Jim Cornette and just OVW at the time that John Cena would have gotten there.
Jim Cornette and OVW are synonymous. Jim Cornette, when he left from the day-to-day operations in Stanford, because he didn't want to just be a writer, he went to Louisville. And with Danny Davis, they opened up OVW Wrestling, and it was a training ground where we could send talent to train during the day, and then they ran live events during the week so the talent could train and learn. We put trainers in place in OVW, but then they could also display their wares to an audience that actually paid money to see them several times a week. And they did weekly television shows. So OVW was our NXT at the time. And we sent, that's pretty much where we sent everybody down there. And Rico Constantino, who is another one from UPW that Rick introduced us to. He was the first champion of American Gladiators, if people remember the American Gladiators. And we sent him down to OVW. There was a guy that Alpha the Samoan had brought to me by the name of Batista, who went to OVW right about that same time. So we had a hell of a crew down there with John Cena, Rico Constantino, and Batista, all in OVW at the same time. But it was just a training ground for them to learn.
So let's talk a little bit about Star Maker Bolin. He's there and is a pretty critical part of John Cena's career, if you believe Star Maker Bolin. So tell us a little bit about Kenny Bolin and his role with John Cena.
Goddamn, Kenny's my best friend, motherfucker. Kenny Bolin and Jim Cornette were best friends growing up, and Jimmy made Bolin a heel manager during this time. I don't know. I wasn't there all the time. What influence that Kenny Bolin might have had on John Cena, but I know that Kenny Bolin was his on-air manager for a time of the Prototype. But beyond that, I'm not sure what influence that Kenny Bolin might have had. I know that Jim Cornette had an awful lot of influence on John Cena, and I know that Danny Davis, the head trainer, had an awful lot of influence on Cena at the time.
You told us once upon a time, when in regards to Kurt Angle, that he took to it like a fish to water and that he was attacking the mat with flatbacks and such. Did you get any sort of report like that from John Cena's training in OVW?
Not from John, no. John had 2 left feet, and John was clumsy in the ring, but he worked hard, and he wanted to get better, but he was just so damn clumsy. So they tried to limit what John would do, and then they kept him in the Prototype gimmick, and instead of having him go out there and try and work like everybody else, they tried to slow him down and take things out of his repertoire so that he didn't look as clumsy. But in contrast, Rico Constantino was the perfect, if you want to have a prototype of what you would have wanted in a traditional Southern wrestler at that time, that was Rico Constantino.
Isn't that amazing that, Rico, who by all accounts is a great guy, he seemed like he had the more upside in the beginning, and it wound up being John freaking Cena.
Right. And, you saw John and you knew John was going to be a star. You didn't know to what extent. But you looked at Reno and you saw superstar early on. And the only thing that I think that we had the strikes against Rico were his age. But John was this raw young talent.
Easy for you to say.
Oh, exactly.
And there were lots of other folks there. David Flair was down there at the time. I mean, you had tons of folks, coming through OVW, and we've made a list here before, but, John Cena, Brock Lesnar, Shelton Benjamin, Randy Orton, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it felt like the prototype based on the look would have been can't miss. And I guess that's kind of why I find it so interesting, when you tell me that for whatever reason, Vince just didn't love the look here. The gimmick for the prototype is that he had the perfect body, he was the perfect man, and he was the future of the business. And Danny Davis would actually say that Cena's drive was unlike anyone else he had ever met. When did you know that he had this crazy drive and motor, I guess is what they like to call it in the business?
I probably saw it in California because there was just no stopping him. He would, like I said, he would pick me up sometimes and drop me off after the fact, but he would come from the gym and then go back to the gym at night. So I knew that he had this unbelievable drive. And then when you put him in OVW in a completely different environment from California, and other people like Danny Davis and Cornette start talking about, holy cow, man, this kid is the first one in the ring and the last one to leave. You're going, okay, that's good. Those are the things that you like to hear back. That's good feedback that you like to hear about somebody. And that was Cena. I mean, he worked harder and he worked longer than anybody else. I think we just wished it would have happened a little bit sooner. And we wished that clumsiness that later on, I think Vince started to like, just wasn't going away. And that just became a part of John's charm, if you will.
One of the things that made Cena stand out early on in his OVW run was his silly promos. And he was doing these with everybody. And a lot of people there said that this was the intangible that kind of set him apart from everybody else. They were witty. They were funny. He even did some stuff with Mark Cuban. How in the world does Mark Cuban wind up in an OVW promo?
Luck, just strictly luck, and timing, being right place, right time. Yeah, it was his creativity that, again, you started to see that his personality was larger than life as well. Now, again, I keep going back to, I think everybody unanimously did not care for the prototype gimmick and felt it was too hokey. However, in OVW, them using it kind of fit for there. And Cornette loved it, and it was something that John was comfortable with, so we wanted him to be comfortable in that training, and then we'll kind of mold him when we get him away from there and get ready to bring him to the show. But you got to see his personality, and you got to see him think on his feet. And I thought he was very creative in some of the stuff. It made me laugh. Not always in the best way, but at least he was thinking.
Well, one of the things that he did that really stands out that people were talking about, and I remember even seeing this in the dirt sheets at the time, that he would do a promo where he would, right in the middle, rewind himself and then repeat things he said earlier. So he would say it forwards and then he would say it backwards. Was that something that kind of made its way through the office that people were talking about?
It did, because it was unique and it was funny and he did it well. But that was John Cena. That was all him.
When word of a guy in OVW like this starts to kind of leak out to the main roster in the office, I wonder how that happens and how it's received. JBL was on record as saying he thought he was just another dumb bodybuilder who wasn't going to make it. And McMahon himself even said that he thought he looked like G.I. Joe and he didn't move with very much fluidity and he just didn't think he would make it. But you've kind of talked about on the show before here that, hey, when some of the top guys start taking a shit on you, it lets you know that you're getting over. Now that's different when it's the boss. How does this word kind of leak out though? And how is it received that, hey, there's a guy down here in developmental, you got to see him?
Timing. And it's all about how you do it, where you do it, and when you do it. And you have to be careful what you show the boss sometimes. And I think that, Vince would walk into the office while we were watching shows sometimes and just want to take a look and just start watching the show. And it may not be the best performance of that talent. And think, what the hell are we doing down there? God damn, that's awful. And he would forget, this is a training ground. This is where they're allowed to be awful. So let him learn. We'll get that. But Vince just saw him as clumsy and saw the gimmick that he was doing as hokey and didn't think that was helping him in any way be a future superstar. And I think that, guys that would go down there and they would see him, again, he wasn't fluid. He wasn't that really smooth worker in the ring. And they would come back going, I don't know about that one. But at the same time, I think that they saw the personality and drive, and maybe that's something that went, I don't want that guy up here taking my spot.
Let's talk about Jim Cornette and the kind of the creative culture of OVW. I'm sure we'll talk about this another time, long form, but would he allow the guys to have kind of the creative license and the freedom to do their own thing? Or was he helping shape the characters and saying, now here's what you're going to do? And I know some of that would probably be dictated by the WWE. Cornette's told the story of the Boogeyman before. And if you haven't heard that story, you should go to YouTube and check that out. It's phenomenal. But anyway, what say you about the creative climate of OVW?
A little bit of both. If we had an idea creatively, we would want them to work on at OVW. We would say, hey, this is what we want you to work on. Most of the time, we would let Corny and Danny Davis do their thing. And the way that Cornette worked is Cornette would have ideas and Cornette would work with guys' gimmicks to put them in positions and just try and help mold them along the way. But Corny also gave them an awful lot of breathing room to develop their own personality and their own gimmick in the standard of the way the business had always traditionally been. So to answer your question, it's a mixture of both. And sometimes we would have very distinctive gimmicks we wanted to see worked and done. And sometimes we would say, come up with something, give us something. And they would work on it together and go from there.
October 10th, 2000, Cena gets the big break he was hoping for when he finally gets to make his WWE debut. Although it's in a dark match at a SmackDown taping, he would lose the match to Mikey Richardson. What's Mikey Richardson doing these days?
Yeah, I think Mikey's there at the car wash on 7th Street. I have no idea what Mikey Richardson's doing these days.
That's hurtful, but if you're listening and you know what Mikey Richardson is up to these days, we would love to hear from you on Twitter, at Prichard Show, or me. I am at Hey, it's Conrad. I've always found it fun to kind of track down, where are they now? The guy who beat John Cena in his first match, that's a fun story. Do you remember seeing that match in particular? I mean, obviously at the time, nobody knows what they're watching, but do you remember any of Cena's dark matches? He would have another one on January 9th in 2001. This one was against Aaron Aguilera, and then he would wrestle another dark match for SmackDown on March 13th. And this is kind of the way, and I guess we'll talk about dark matches in a minute, but do you remember any of Cena's dark matches here in 2000, 2001?
I do, from the standpoint of trying to get him out on the show, and I wasn't completely confident that he was ready to move up onto the roster, but he had been in OVW for a little while, and we were looking to make some moves, and of guys that were ready and kind of slated for next to fish or cut bait, John was one of those guys. So we had to get him out on the road, get him in front of the agents, get him in front of Vince, and see how he would perform in that environment. And he, the first few matches weren't that great. He was still clumsy. Now, I don't remember the first one. I definitely do remember the one with Aaron Aguilera, because Aaron Aguilera was also a UPW guy from California.
Right.
And they had worked together before, and we had our eyes on Aaron as well, and we thought that since they had worked together, it might be a good match. John, being John, tried to make Aaron, and it wasn't the best match in the world. But after time, you started seeing something that they were responding to Cena. And it's like, there's got to be something here because they're responding to him. There's this, when a guy walks out and you get that ooh from a crowd, you got something and you can build on it.
Let's talk about dark matches and how they're set up. Is there like a hard and fast rule for the number of minutes that the guys get?
It really depends on how soon we get started. If we're going live and we could actually get started 20 minutes before the live show, then we would usually give them a little bit of time. But for the most part, it was to see how they reacted in the ring, see how they moved in the ring, responded to the audience, and worked the cameras. So, usually you gave them 5-6 minutes.
Is there an agent who kind of meets with them beforehand and says, you've got 5 or 6 minutes, here's the finish, and that's it? Or do they kind of lay out what they want in a match? And are they giving them pointers on, now remember, we're going to judge you here based on how you work the camera and crowd reaction? Do they get any sort of clue like that? Or is it just, all right, boys, go tear it up. You got 6 minutes, figure it out.
No. They've got agents that go through everything, what they're looking for them to do. And they show them where the hard cameras are, and they explain to them what is expected out of them. Back in those days, they would probably just give them a finish and give them vague generalities as to what they're looking for in the match. But nowadays, they probably map out every single move in the match and how many breaths you take in between each hold. Back then, it was a little bit different, but they probably got the lay of the land in a very general sense, is to go on out there, have a good match, show your stuff, you're going over, here's the finish we want, take your time, don't rush, and listen, this is the time, don't go over it.
Who is helping kind of put together these dark matches as far as deciding who's getting the opportunity, and who would have been doing that when Cena's there? Is this Jim Ross saying, well, hell, boy, let's give him a try. Let's let old Corny pick a couple kids up from OVW off the prototype, and how does that work?
That would usually be a combination of creative, if they were watching the OVW tapes at the time and just take a look at developmental.
You guys in creative would have someone watch OVW tapes?
Oh, hell yeah.
That's amazing to me. In my head, nobody in creative watches anything other than last week's Raw, and sometimes not even that.
Yeah, no, we watched everything from the developmental areas every single week, and it would be something from them. Hey, let's take a look at this guy. It would be Jim Ross pushing sometimes. Hey, these guys have been down here for a while. Is there any interest? I'm going to bring them up so you guys can see them in the ring at TV, get to meet them, get to be around them. Or it could be OVW saying, hey, we've got one that we think is ready. So it's kind of a combination of all the above. Most of the time it would be dictated from either creative or talent relations.
June 28th, 2001, The Big Show and Mark Henry defeated The Prototype and Mr. Black in OVW. Hypothetically speaking, in June of 01, why would Big Show and Mark Henry have been in OVW?
To lose weight.
Talk me through what that means, though. What is it about the Ohio Valley that has these healing properties that just drops the weight off the boys?
Well, what it is when they were in Ohio Valley, they weren't on WWF television anymore. So they either lost weight to get back on the Big Show, yeah, no pun intended, or they continued their ways and would be released. So it was a place that they could go. They could train every single day in the ring. They could work out, hopefully change their eating habits, and get into a little bit better shape.
So the idea is sending someone to Louisville, Kentucky is a punishment.
It wasn't a punishment. It was an opportunity for them to lose weight and get in better shape because they're not doing it while they're on the road every day with us. So they're sitting there and they're not in the shape that they need to be in. So it's time to go somewhere, learn a new hold, and get in better shape.
So help me understand. You guys think it's a smart idea to send them down to be with a guy whose cheeseburger order is what?
Double cheese, double onion, double mayo, motherfucker.
I tell you what, if you were to send me to Ohio Valley to lose weight, I would serve you at 9:30 at night with a restraining order because I'm eating my cheeseburgers.
Would that be like an emergency protection order?
Bro, let's move on. August 15th,
All right, bro.
2001.
Just saying, because, if you got any bullets in that gun.
Hey, calm down, no balls, Prichard.
Well, you know what? I don't think that I would even know how to be able to go out and serve an emergency protection order myself, or file one or anything like that, bro.
August 15th, 2001, Cena and Rico defeat the Disciples of Sin in a tournament final in the OVW Southern Tag Team title match. And then October 27th, 2001, we see Mark Henry and Randy Orton defeat Rico and the Prototype in a non-title match. So there you go. All the way back in October of 01, Randy Orton and John Cena were working together. A couple nights later, on the 29th, they would lose the tag team titles on a WWF Jacked show in a dark match to the Minnesota Stretching Crew. Brock Lesnar and Shelton Benjamin. What a phenomenal name that is. It's just hard to imagine, really think about that. October 29th, 2001, you've got Rico and John Cena working a tag match with Brock Lesnar and Shelton Benjamin. This roster is ridiculously loaded, is it not?
It was one of the best rosters ever in OVW when you think about it. And the funny thing there was Rico was the guy everybody thought was going to be the star, and Rico and Shelton. Good God, what a crew we had there. I'm, not discounting Brock Lesnar at all, because I think that the very first time that anybody saw Brock Lesnar walk backstage back in Minneapolis at SummerSlam with Jesse Ventura, they went, "Oh my God, that son of a bitch is going to be something." Yeah, it was a great roster, man. Please. And you talk about guys, you talked earlier about Kurt Angle attacking the mat, and Kurt Angle being an absolute natural when he got in the ring. The only other guy, Rock was a natural, but the only other guy that I remember just the first time seeing him in the ring and first time seeing him perform and train, that I thought, oh my God, there's, we called him for a long time the future of the company. That was Randy Orton.
Well, you weren't wrong. I mean, he's still.
No, I know, yeah. But he was 19 years old, and his dad wanted him wanted him to train. We wanted him to finish college, and he finished up his stuff. But he was great. He was great then.
February 16th, 2002, on OVW TV, we would see David Flair defeat the Prototype. What you got any memories of David Flair in OVW? It feels like he had high hopes in WCW. Obviously, they rushed him too soon, and then they put him over with the WWF. He spent some time in Ohio Valley. Us WWE fans, we remember the angle with The Undertaker attacking him to build up the WrestleMania match with Undertaker and Ric Flair. Why didn't we see more of David Flair beyond OVW?
I don't think that David was as interested in the wrestling business as I think everybody else was interested in him being in the wrestling business. He just wasn't a natural like Rick or Charlotte. And I think that he didn't like it. And this is me just subjugating here, because I never spent a lot of time with David, and I wasn't around him a whole lot, but he just didn't have the charisma and same skills as his sister and his father.
How fun is this note? April 5th, 2002, for OVW Spring Breakout, Rick and David Flair defeat the Prototype and Sean O'Hare. I don't know why, but I find this fun because all this time later, I guess 15, 16 years later, Cena winds up tying Ric Flair's 16 world title reigns in their first match, April 5th, 2002, with David Flair and Sean O'Hare.
It's crazy, I know. Yeah, and when you look, and again, look at that, and look at the timing of it all. If you were to look at those guys, you've got the past and one of the greatest of all time, and Ric Flair and his son, who people would have thought because of the legacy that he would be one of the next ones, against John and Sean O'Hare, who Sean O'Hare, there were people that thought, oh my God, he's going to be the future. And still kind of overlooking Cena, just thinking, you know what, Cena's going to be a hell of a hand.
February 20th, 2002, the Prototype with Kenny Bolin defeated Leviathan with Sin to win the OVW heavyweight title. That's a WrestleMania main event right there. Of course, Leviathan would go on to be known as Batista. And correct me if I'm right here, Leviathan's manager, Sin, is Jim Cornette's wife.
Correctamundo.
So you've got Jim Cornette's wife in one corner, his best friend in another, and in the ring is John Cena and Batista. This feels crazy that happened more than 15 years ago.
No kidding. With the Prototype and Leviathan. Yeah, a little bit, man. And I think their careers came a long way since then.
Jim Cornette has said of John's time in OVW that Cena was a hard worker, looked the best of anyone there. He thought he was a great heel, and he thought that Cena could have been a modern day Ric Flair type of heel. But of course, we're not going to see that. I mean, we did see a little bit of a heel run for a hiccup with John Cena early in his WWE run. But if things were different, how do you think John Cena present day would be as a heel?
Excellent.
I think he'd be one of the best ever, man. It's a shame that we'll never see it.
John's a natural heel, and I think he would be absolutely excellent at it.
When you say natural heel, a lot of people are going to wonder what you mean.
He can come across, he's a smart ass in general, and he's a funny son of a bitch, but he can naturally just come across as a heel without even trying. Misunderstood.
When the big four were there in OVW, Cena, Lesnar, Orton, and Batista, who did you think would be the biggest star of all? Randy Orton?
Randy Orton. Looking
back now, if you had to pick one, Cena, Lesnar, Orton, Batista, who would you pick?
Cena. I mean, hindsight being 2020, yeah, it's Cena. But at the time, it was, man, you got a blue chipper, Randy Orton.
May 18th, we would see Nova defeat the Prototype to win the heavyweight title. And then they would do kind of a big show on May 31st of 2002 at Six Flags, where we would see Nova defeat Prototype to retain the title, and Mick Foley was the special referee. Of course he is. It's at Six Flags. A couple of weeks after that, they'd be back at Six Flags with Jerry Lawler and Nova defeating Prototype and Sean O'Hare. Is the gimmick here, hey guys, does anybody want to go get VIP treatment at Six Flags? Because we'll send you to OVW if you do.
No, it was during the summer that OVW had a deal with Six Flags, whatever kingdom there in Louisville, where they did live events in the park. I think it was every Friday night or something like that. And Six Flags paid them a nice little fee. And it was better than having to go out and draw a house somewhere, because you had several thousand people that were at Six Flags that would come in, and they would actually buy Six Flag tickets cheaper with the OVW coupon and then go to the wrestling matches. So I think for Mick Foley, that was definitely a way to get Mick to go to Louisville. Hey, Mick, and you get to go to Six Flags. Woohoo! I don't think Lawler as much, but it was just simply a time, and it was a time during the summer that they ran Six Flags every week.
June of 2002 was all about John Cena in the WWE. This is when he starts to really hit his stride. He works a house show with Crash Holly on the 7th. On the 8th, he is taking an L from Albert on Velocity. On the 9th, he's working a house show again with Crash Holly. And he would also do Heat that day with Shelton Benjamin in a dark match. He would do that again on the 16th with Scott Vick, this time getting the win. On the 22nd, he would work against Tommy Dreamer and take the loss, but then defeat Shelton Benjamin on Velocity in a dark match. And then return the favor on Heat, where Shelton Benjamin would go over in a dark match for Heat. So this is a lot of matches here in a hurry on the main roster. Is this kind of the final polishing piece, and what is happening behind the scenes to get John Cena ready? Obviously, we know we're giving him some ring time. He's working in front of the lights, in front of the cameras, in front of the big crowd, in the big ring. But what behind the scenes is happening to get John Cena ready for his debut?
Well, it's time to, fish or cut bait. So this was during a time for both John Cena and for Shelton Benjamin too, at this time, to get them out on the road, let different agents have the opportunity to work with them, let them work with some different talent, let all the other talent get to see them and get their input. And it was just that fish or cut bait time. Get them out on the road and let's see how they do. You can work one way at television, and then you're going to work a different way in house shows. So this was an opportunity to get them on house shows and get them in front of a paying audience, see how the audience responds, see how the agents and talent respond to them as well. And then you make your decisions.
Well, and it finally happens. It happens on June 27th, 2002, which is why we're covering him today. The 15-year anniversary of John Cena's debut will be this coming Tuesday, the 27th. He makes his debut here against Kurt Angle, and this all comes after Vince McMahon has started to talk about ruthless aggression. And that's actually what he described that it took to get rid of WCW, was his ruthless aggression. And that's kind of a Vince McMahonism. Before we talk about the debut, when do you remember ruthless aggression becoming such a big deal within the company? Was anybody for it? Did anybody think it was hokey? Why did Vince love it so much?
Because it was Vince's idea. You got to have ruthless aggression to succeed. And he was, Vince would do these work shoot type things where in reality, Vince felt you had to have ruthless aggression if you wanted to make it. And you had to not care about your fellow man, and you had to step up and grab that brass ring and have ruthless aggression. So Vince cuts that promo to be able to inspire and get the talent off their ass, if you will. So that was the whole idea behind it, to see who was going to step up, and anybody that stepped up hopefully would get that opportunity. And we were making some changes at this point in time and looking for people to get out of their shell. This was at the same time we were trying to make the move with Bradshaw, as a matter of fact, to get John to step up in that singles capacity and do something.
So, of course, Angle's in the ring, opens or issues an open challenge to anyone on the roster, and Cena comes out. And Angle asks him, what's the one quality you possess that makes you think you can walk out here, come in the ring, and face the very best? And Cena says ruthless aggression, and then slaps Kurt Angle, and they have a match. And Kurt's kind of giving him a lot here. The clothesline, the power slam, the spine buster. It's a lot against Angle on your first night in, when Angle is obviously one of the more decorated champions at that point. I thought it was a pretty hell of a debut for John Cena, was it not?
I thought it was an excellent debut, and that's part of I don't know if John could have debuted with someone else and made quite the impact. A lot of that I give the credit to Kurt Angle, who was extremely unselfish and knew going out there that his job was to get this guy over. And I thought that Kurt did a great job doing it, and John stepped up to the plate.
Later in that episode of SmackDown, Cena's shown backstage talking to Rikishi, Ron Simmons, and Billy Kidman, and they're all congratulating him on the match with Angle. And Rikishi says he's going to be a big superstar. And then The Undertaker, who's the undisputed champ at the time, came up to Cena and said, "What's your name, kid?" And Cena responds with John Cena. Undertaker repeats his name, takes his glasses off, and shakes Cena's hand and says, "Nice job," and walks away. Cena just stands there smiling and looking at his hand. That it's a big deal that he was acknowledged by The Undertaker. Pretty big deal for this to be done here. And I find it kind of interesting because The Undertaker, I believe at this point, was a heel. So whose idea was this for it to happen? And who, I guess, decides to sprinkle some Undertaker dust on Cena right away?
I believe it was Paul Heyman's idea for Undertaker to come in and shake his hand and endorse John Cena, because it was unique, and Taker was a heel, and Taker was the man So if he got the endorsement of, the big dog in the yard, then the audience might think, oh, hey, this guy may be something special. And I thought it was beautifully done, and it did help. It did help sprinkle Undertaker dust on Cena, get him moving in the right direction.
Brian Alvarez put the segment over really, really huge, the segment with Angle, saying that it was great and that he thought Flair or that Angle did his best to make a superstar in one night like Flair did in the 80s, and that he gave one hell of a performance that night. How much of John Cena's success should be credited to Kurt Angle not gobbling him up and making him look stupid in that debut? Because he certainly could have. And I know that's not necessarily in Kurt Angle's character, but in a generation prior to this, it would have crossed their mind to just guzzle him, would it not?
I think that the opportunity's there, and trust me, if Kurt Angle wanted to guzzle you, he would. But I think that Kurt, being the professional that he is, the true pro, went out and did his job and made a new star in John Cena.
They do an angle where Jericho is talking smack about the way Cena dresses and his haircut. And he says something like, what type of ruthless aggression do you have, Junior? And Cena slapped him down, and this starts their program. Before we move on to talk about this angle, we should mention that at this era, Cena is wearing bike shorts and boots to kind of match the local sports team. So if they were in Pittsburgh, he'd be wearing black with yellow trim. If they were in Green Bay, he'd be wearing yellow with green trim. Whose idea was this? How white meat babyface was this? And who talked him out of this?
This was all John Cena's idea, and John wanted to do something unique and different everywhere he went. He bought all new trunks and all matching boots. I saw the closet in his dad's house of all of those outfits, and he wore a different one every single night. So that was Cena's idea and just something that he wanted to do.
Do you remember any sort of controversy about the Chris Jericho slapping segment? Because I like that you're laughing. Let me just go ahead and read right from, as there was a huge controversy regarding an angle with John Cena that got nixed. If you saw SmackDown, Jericho gave Cena lip and got a hard slap for his troubles. The original angle involved Cena slapping Vince, and everyone who heard the entire plan thought it was awesome and would get Cena over as a superstar, enter Triple H. He did not think this would be such a great idea. Instead, he felt this green youngster should be taking finishing moves from the top guys. He also thought it was absurd that anyone would seriously slap his boss across the face. Plus, he said nobody should even touch Vince until his match with Hogan at SummerSlam, and Vince ended up siding with Hunter. There were guys backstage outraged when the word of the change got to them. So I want to know what's real, what's rumor, and what's innuendo.
Well, first of all, there probably was the idea to slap Vince, but it made no sense because of where we were going with Hogan and Vince. And I don't know that it made it past the discussion stage. So it probably sounds like whosever idea that was, that they got out and said, wouldn't this have been better if he slapped McMahon? Or something like that. I don't know how that would have gone. But the whole idea was you slap Jericho and then maybe get something on with Jericho. Now, I produced that bit. I believe we were in Boston because I know that I can see the room right now where it was. And I remember John was so nervous, and this is John's second appearance on television. And I said, listen, you've got to knock the shit out of Jericho. I said, you can't do a work slap. You've got to slap the shit out of him. You got to light him up. And I told Jericho, I said, Chris, he's going to slap the shit out of you and he's going to light you up. So just telling you, it's coming. So they're standing there with Vince, and Jericho fed him, man. Chris was just like, don't hit my ear. Don't break my eardrum, man. Don't knock my teeth out. Well, John throws his slap and no shit knocks Jericho on his ass about 3 feet back.
That was not a stunt fall. That's a shoot. Got knocked down.
100% Jericho fucking goes, "What the fuck, man?" And go, "God damn, learn to work." And then Vince was like, "God damn, pal, you can't be throwing live rounds like that." But I told him to do it, and I told him it was coming.
Well, in fairness, there is a difference between slapping someone and
about killing someone. John's so damn worked up that, I mean, oh, good God. It was brutal. And Jericho's looking at me like, "Fuck you, you take that slap." I'm like, Yeah, it was a little snug, to say the least.
My ass. John Cena didn't want none. You're a 3-time karate black belt Hall of Famer.
Yeah, I don't want none of that either.
So do you remember this story about Vince and Hunter getting it changed?
No, like I said, I think it was just an idea that was brought up that I think everybody kind of shit on, because what do you do with it?
Well,
we had the whole idea was we were going with Vince and Hogan. We weren't going with Vince and Cena, and it was a new guy. Put Cena with somebody that he can have a match with.
The line about who would think it's believable that you could slap your boss across the face cracked me up, though. Who would think it's okay to stun your boss, make him pee his pants on live TV, spray him with a beer?
No, that's different from an established guy, and a guy that's his second week on TV. And again, the basic premise of it is Vince was with Hogan. We didn't want to go somewhere else.
I get it. It's just, it was an excuse for Alvarez to take a shit on Triple H, and that's not what we do on this show, right?
That's right. Well, I'm not going to take a shit on something that isn't there and doesn't have any fucking credibility.
I'm just busting.
He wasn't there.
Bruce. Calm down. Don't serve me tonight.
Am I going to have to do a fuck? What's the guy's name?
A fuck? What's the guy's name?
What's the guy? Alvarez? What's his first name?
Brian Alvarez.
Am I going to have to do a FBA?
What is that?
Shirt? Fuck Brian Alvarez shirt?
Oh, that's hurtful. Why would you even suggest that?
I don't know. Because he wasn't there either.
Oh, gosh. Here we go. The July 4th SmackDown is what we're talking about here. Cena wrestled Chris Jericho. It's the second ever televised WWE match. Brian Alvarez would write. Jericho beat Cena. Jericho did a great job with him, giving him near fall after near fall before finally pinning him using the ropes. Jericho offered to shake hands after the match, but then sucker punched him. Cena responded by hitting him with the Protoplex to a big pop. Even though he's lost his first 2 big matches, people are going to take him seriously because he's allowed to be more than competitive against top stars. So far, so good. What were the plans for Cena at this point? Now, normally I would beat you up about, hey, let's push the guy, let's have him lose. But he's losing to former world champions who are at the peak of their career, and you're putting him with Angle and Jericho, who could probably have a 5-star match with a broomstick. Not 6 1/4 stars unless they were in Japan, but you get where I'm going. Who was an advocate for Cena, at this point in pushing him this way?
I was, Eamon was, I think everybody was, because he was new. And that, you ask what the plans were, there were no plans. We wanted to get him on TV, and we wanted to get him out there and see what he could do. And he delivered. He hung with Angle and he hung with Jericho. The plan was, we had no plan. The plan was get him on TV and we'll figure it out after the fact if he catches on. And he got reactions and started catching on due to those great matches that he had with both of those guys. So a lot of the credit, goes to Kurt Angle, and a lot of the credit goes to Chris Jericho for being able to go out and have the matches that they had with Cena, when if you were to put him with someone equal, he wouldn't have had. So we just wanted new talent. We were so desperate for something new. And let's get him out there, and we'll figure it out after we get him out there.
So by the July 11th SmackDown, Cena is already working the main event. Here he teams with The Undertaker to take on Kurt Angle and Chris Jericho. Before the match, Cena met with Undertaker in the parking garage. and says that he's thrilled to be teaming with him later. Undertaker says that's great, but he doesn't give a damn about Cena or the match. In the match, Cena pins Jericho with a roll-up after Undertaker hit Jericho in the face while he attempted a lion salt on Cena. We talked about this a few minutes ago, but it's obvious that the WWE is quickly pushing Cena to main event status right away. Do you know if any veterans had a problem with this? It feels like, a lot of the guys are probably on the sidelines like, shit, I've been waiting on my shot forever, and now this kid's coming in and getting pushed to the moon right away.
There was probably some of that resentment. I didn't hear it because, most of the time those guys aren't going to come and tell you that unless it's a top guy. But for the most part, it was, let's try this. And like I said, there weren't any steadfast plans, long-term shit. And the fact that Undertaker was involved in it and the fact that Cena had done favors for both Angle and Jericho is like, hey, what if he slipped over? And he slipped over with the help of The Undertaker, and I think anybody could buy that. But it was kind of, you got lightning in a bottle, keep going with it.
Next up, we want to talk about the kind of positioning of the babyface versus the heel, because in OVW, he's a heel, but on WWE, he's a babyface. Why is this happening? Why is there not some more continuity here? Did anybody care?
No one cared. Vince felt that OVW was a regional television show that only people in Louisville, Kentucky, few people watched it, and he was more worried about the worldwide audience.
At the Vengeance 02 pay-per-view, we would see John Cena make his pay-per-view debut, and he pins Chris Jericho in 6 minutes and 21 seconds. Did you have a discussion with Jericho about how he feels about putting Cena over so quickly? I mean, it's important to mention here that a few months prior to this, he was headlining WrestleMania against Triple H, and he was the undisputed champion. Less than a year prior, he had beat both The Rock and Undertaker in the same night. And now he's losing to a guy making his pay-per-view debut in under 6.5 minutes.
Was there any heat from Jericho?
Did Jericho have any pushback about his positioning here?
No, not that I can remember, because again, you look at guys like Chris Jericho and Chris Benoit and Kurt Angle, they were at a point in their career that they took pride in making guys, and they took pride in being able to have, take that guy that nobody can have a match with and have the best match on the card.
You're saying now, this about a guy.
This won the best match on the card, but these were guys that took pride in doing that. So I don't remember any pushback at all from Jericho.
July 29th, in the July 29th edition of the Figure 4 Weekly, Alvarez wrote, John Cena beat Chris Jericho. Cena finally got new music. No heat. Thanks, I'm sure, to the burial of Cena on SmackDown this past Thursday. Admittedly, he looked really green in spots, most notably whenever he threw a punch. Still, it's not like he's an embarrassment, and they need new faces, so they've got to push him. Tons of near falls near the finish, but the crowd never really bought that Cena was going to beat him. Cena kicked out of pretty much everything. Jericho finally hit the lion salt, but refused to make the cover. Instead, he went for the lion tamer, and Cena small packaged him for the clean pin. SmackDown was a step backwards for sure, but they did the right thing here, and as long as they follow up on it well and don't immediately give Jericho back his win on SmackDown, Cena might end up okay. 2.25 stars. I think Cena wound up okay.
You think so?
This is some pretty creative booking, though, where you've got a guy dominate another guy, and then he small packages him. I say it's creative. I mean, it's classic wrestling. Around this time, too, you had a segment on SmackDown where Jericho would just punch Cena right in the balls, and the ref rang the bell. What did you think of the way John Cena was booked early here with Jericho?
I think that the first was simply to put him with an experienced guy that could help get him over in the ring and not be embarrassed in the ring. But the reality is that we really didn't have specific long-term plans at this. We wanted to get him on TV and hopefully get Vince or somebody to commit to say, okay, I like him. Let's do something with him. And during this time, there was just a lot of upheaval, and getting him out there was the most important thing. Needed something new.
I ask about this in particular because Alvarez wrote that Triple H lobbied for Cena to pin Jericho cleanly, but he was overruled, and they did this DQ finish instead. Do you remember Jericho having a problem doing another job for Cena, or was somebody else overruling this at this point?
Whenever you read this kind of stuff and I hear this kind of thing, it's usually Vince or the agents that sit there and think about it and go, why are we beating Jericho? Or, God damn, just beat him. Come up with something else. Rather than someone petitioning or making a case. But it's most of the times, 9 times out of 10, that's Vince wanting to protect somebody by not having them pinned.
At this point, are people starting to wonder, did we call him up from OVW too soon?
I think there was some people questioning that. Yeah, definitely. And
who?
God, I think there were talent that were doing it. There were those of us on the creative team wondering if we pulled that trigger a little bit too soon. I don't know that Stephanie was on board. I don't know that Vince was 100% on board at this point. I know that Heyman and I were big proponents of John Cena, only from the standpoint of we liked him personally and we wanted new. So that was the main reasoning. We were just pushing for new talent, and we wanted to shake things up a little bit.
On the July 25th SmackDown, Cena pinned Test, and Alvarez would write, Cena actually looked better here than he did in his last 2 matches with Jericho. He hit the Protoplex at one point, but Test kicked out. Later, Cena kicked out of the pump handle slam, which was met with a round of indifference. Test went for a powerbomb, but Cena rolled through the pin. The crowd popped big, but Test immediately waylaid him with the kick of death to make sure the finish didn't get over. Note to WWE, you are killing Cena. This does seem like at this point Test is obviously not positioned as a top guy, but it is a win and it's clean for Cena. But when the heel gets his heat right back after after a pin, it does kind of feel 50-50. It's like it doesn't matter, right?
I hate it. Yes.
So if you hate it, who did it?
I don't remember who specifically, but Vince had to endorse it. It was probably an agent coming back and telling him, well, why is this new guy going over, clean on Test? Still got something in Test. Can he get something after the match? And that 50-50 booking, nobody gets over with that.
Right.
Nobody gets over there. Test isn't getting back over by getting heat after the fact. And we just felt that, damn it, if Cena can't beat Test, then who the hell can he beat? And I just think that Cena should have got the win and moved on.
A week later on SmackDown, Cena would pin Rico. Alvarez would write, wow, so much for Cena's big push. By the way, shouldn't these men be a badass tag team together? Clearly, nobody in creative actually watches OVW TV. Otherwise, we wouldn't be watching this match right now. Rico missed his moonsault, and Cena made his big comeback and got the pin with the Protoplex. Crowd didn't care about this match. Rico looked really good. Billy and Chucky ran down and beat up Cena afterwards. You just said that creative does watch OVW, but they weren't put together here. Who kind of decides we can't let them do what they were doing down there as a tag team? We need to run them as singles.
Well, first of all, they were a heel tag team in OVW, and Vince did not see anything in Rico Constantino at that time. He felt that he was too old and was a stereotypical wrestler, as Vince used to like to say, and didn't see any star power in him. So in that regard, you look at Cena, who's a young guy coming up. He was going, okay, I'll take a chance on him, but putting them together would be the kiss of death for both.
It feels like, Jericho's abusing him. Chuck and Billy are beating him up. Testa's beating him up. You guys are regretting bringing him up at this point. I mean, this feels like you guys are intentionally burying him.
No, we're trying to get him out there. And then, unfortunately, a lot of times what happens is, and this is a big frustration from a creative standpoint, where you would come up with something and you write something and you have in your head what you want to do for the next, at least for that show and maybe the next couple of shows, and you get to TV and you get in front of a production meeting with a bunch of guys who are only there for that day and that night and don't know what you're going to do next week or don't know what your plans are for the future. Granted, bad on our part, we didn't have a whole lot of plans for Cena. And guys making suggestions, oh, well, you should just kick his fucking head off, or you should just beat him up afterwards. Why is he beating him clean? And it would take away what you just spent time writing. And that change would be made. And again, that goes back to Vince changing his mind at the last minute constantly on the days of the show.
So Vince, was at this point routinely calling audibles?
He still does, yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, you're going to go ahead and love everything about the Audible we're calling here, because Audible is your hookup. They've launched their very first ever binge listening event, and you've been invited to binge on great listens and big savings with their very biggest sale ever. You'll enjoy all the benefits of a Gold Audible membership. We're talking about celebrity narrated Audible books, new podcasts and audio shows, most importantly, exclusive content and more. And you can join right now and go ahead and get a year of Audible for how much, Bruce?
Only $99, and that's a $50 saving from their normal membership fee. But the sale ends on June 28th, and you can learn more at audible.com/binge. And it's great if you are in the car and you're taking a road trip to St. Louis or somewhere, or you're going back from Huntsville to St. Louis back and forth. You can just use Audible and listen to a book instead of having to sit there and read the book. And it's a great way to get your information from some great books at Audible.
I wish I had Audible this past weekend. I was on my way. I did some research, and of course I live in tiny little Huntsville, Alabama. So the only way I could get to St. Louis is a layover in Atlanta. So by the time I got to the airport an hour early, had a layover, and then actually landed in St. Louis, it was going to be a 6-hour deal. Well, according to Google, I could drive it in 5 hours. So I thought, I'll just drive. I mean, why would I do that? So I get about 20 miles outside of Paducah, Kentucky, and I realize I have a flat tire. And it turns out it's really, really hard to get a 245, 35, R21 Pirelli P0 run flat in a 21-inch tire 20 miles outside of Paducah, Kentucky. So I found myself waiting on the side of the road there for 2 hours for a rental car to come and for a tow truck to come before they could tow my car 221 miles back here to the dealer, and then I could go ahead and get my rental car and continue my trip. This trip would have been tons better if I had Audible. I would have been able to binge on all kinds of new content, and you can too. Go ahead and get a deal while you're at it, man. Only $99. The sale ends June 28th. Hurry over right now. It's audible.com/binge. That's BINGE, audible.com/binge, BINGE. So let's talk about this match on August 8th, because here we see John Cena beat Kurt Angle, and it happens by DQ. Cena's about to win by countout when Benoit runs in and puts him in the crossface, and then Rey Mysterio Jr. makes the save to a huge pop until Eddie cuts him off. And now Eddie is in to clear the ring, and the crowd is going bonkers for all of this. This is some of the best stuff on SmackDown, and Cena's right in the middle of it. What do you remember about this?
I just remember that it was a time, again, I keep saying we had no plans for John at this point, but it was getting him in the mix of everything that was happening. And rubbing Eddie up against him, rubbing Benoit up against him, anybody that would give him credibility and be able to hide his deficiencies. because he wasn't that ring general in the ring, and he wasn't that guy that could go out there and carry a match and lead a match, but he sure as hell could follow. And by surrounding him with the very best that we had, that was one way to spotlight him.
On the August 22nd edition of SmackDown, Cena would tag with Rikishi against Devon and Deacon Batista. They had teased that they were breaking up a week before, Batista and Devon, but they're back here working a really long match. And then Rikishi would get the vertical splash for the pin. Alvarez would write, "This was mind-numbing, and Cena is now officially lost in the shuffle." Bruce, it seems like Cena's kind of floundering here. He's gone from working in the main events to now he's tagging with Rikishi against Devon and Deacon Batista, which, no disrespect to anyone there, but at that point was positioned to be mid-card. What's the feelings on why it wasn't working with him at this point? And can you comment on, this was like a fine time to bring it up. Cena has often said that he was very close to being fired early in his career, that people had lost confidence in him and didn't think he was going to make it. What say you?
I think that if you want to put blame on anybody, put blame on me. Put blame on me, put blame on the creative, because we didn't have a formal plan. We didn't have a long-term plan, and we were so desperate to get new out there that we put him out there. And I think that without him having a very strong and distinctive personality for people to sink their teeth into, he was the guy that wore the different colored trunks and boots every night for the town that he was in. And he was strong. He had ruthless aggression. Beyond that, who the hell was John Cena?
Right.
And that's a fault that comes squarely down on us, and that comes squarely down right on top of my head, being desperate to get new talent out there, and without having a real plan and without having something more for them.
The next week on August 29th, Reverend Devon pinned John Cena. Alvarez wrote, "Oh my God. Well, John Cena's career's over. Who in the hell booked that?" Batista hit the ring afterwards and squashed Devon, meaning the guy that beat John Cena was made to look like a total loser. Remember 2 weeks ago when this was the greatest show in the whole wide world? A couple days after that, he loses to Nova for the OVW world title. And the next week he's on Velocity and he beats Chavo Guerrero Jr. On the September 23rd edition of the Figure 4 Weekly, Alvarez wrote of John Cena, "The feeling on John Cena is that he's lacking in certain areas, which is why his push on TV has been scaled down. This is starting to sound like a broken record, but he's so much more effective as a heel character than as the goofy, young up-and-coming rookie babyface. And believe me, I'm not the only person who feels that way, especially after his segment aired on Confidential last week, and people actually got to see some of his promos in Ohio Valley. Whether the people in charge of writing are cognizant of this or not is another matter entirely." Hindsight being 2020, should you have debuted Cena as a heel?
No, because Vince hated him as a heel, and Vince hated the prototype character, so we wanted to get as far away from that as we could to get him debuted. So, again, as I just said, man, that falls strictly on creative, and Vince did not care for him as a heel and thought he was hokey and didn't come across well. So we had to figure out a way to get him on and maybe use him as a babyface, and it was just floundering at this point.
September 12th, we would see Cena go ahead and tag with Edge against Eddie and Chavo. Eddie would pin Cena after the frog splash, and a week later, Brock Lesnar would pin Cena in a non-title match. Of the match, Brian Alvarez would write, "Brock Lesnar killed John Cena in a non-title match. Brock looked far greener than usual having to carry a match, especially with someone as green as Cena. It didn't help that nobody gave a rat's ass about Cena or thought he had a chance. The crowd quickly got restless. Brock worked the bear hug forever. Paul, under the guise of being scared the Taker was going to show up, told Brock to get his ass in gear and finish the match. Cena tried a crucifix, but Brock turned it into an F5 for the pin. Total burial of Cena. Crowd at least popped for the big finish, but this was bad TV. This is Brock and Cena's first televised match against each other. Do you remember this match in particular?
Oh God, yes, it was horrible. And the fact that Brock trying to lead Cena through a match, they were both greener than goose shit, but they had worked together in OVW. So the feeling was, okay, they had worked together and they had some fairly decent matches, and OVW, maybe they can have a good match here. Not the case. Bad booking.
September 25th, for OVW, Kenny Bolin defeated John Cena.
My best friend, motherfucker.
And a loser leaves OVW match. Is this the best match that John Cena would work in 2002 with Kenny Bolin?
Well, it was John's first shoot.
And Kenny Bolin actually won a shoot fight with John Cena.
Yeah, sure. I'm positive of that. Yes, definitely.
September 28th on Velocity, we would see John Cena finally get his revenge and beat Reverend Devon. Happened on Velocity. A week after that, Cena would beat Albert on Velocity. And a few days after that, we would see Kurt Angle and Chris Benoit defeat Billy Kidman and John Cena in the tag title tournament. The following week, Cena is going to face off with Kidman, and we start to see what looks like a little bit of a heel turn teased with John Cena. By mid-October, is everybody kind of saying, hey, maybe we need to try this?
Try something different.
On SmackDown on October 24th, Billy Kidman defeated John Cena, but then Cena brutally attacked Kidman after the match. So here's the heel turn we were looking for. And then in Rebellion, which was the UK only pay-per-view on October 26th, we see Billy Kidman and Tori Wilson defeat John Cena and Dawn Marie. Cena has just been turned heel by attacking Kidman. And then a few days later, they're in a mixed tag against each other and Cena lost. So help me understand how this is building a heel turn for John Cena.
It's just during a time of just hot and cold and hot and cold, and I love it. God, that heel turn was great. He'll never make it. It's just that hot and cold booking, man. It was during a time that no matter what we did, it would be second guessed and changed at the last minute every time.
So shortly after this is when you guys decide, I guess I should ask this, when you guys were over doing the tour in England, is this when Stephanie heard about John rapping on the bus? How does this go down?
Okay. First of all, it wasn't Stephanie, it was me. And John, we would travel in buses and we would travel on private charter planes. And Cena would be in the back of the plane, and it was like a scene from a movie, like those movies of the cheerleaders and shit where people all gather around and they start singing and shit like that. Cena would sit in the back of the plane and rap, and he would cut down everybody around him and on the plane. And I remember sitting there listening to this going, oh my God. And everybody's popping. The entire plane is popping at some of the shit that he does. And it was entertaining as hell. And then guys would throw things at him during the tour and stuff and say, hey, John, how about this guy over here? And John would just go into a completely impromptu rap. We were over there. It was a SmackDown writing team, and we were over there to have to come up with a show, the Halloween show that I believe was in Cincinnati, or it was somewhere in Ohio. We were flying back, and we had nothing for John. And we had a big Halloween party where they were going to be dressed and what guys would be involved in it and all this shit. And I said, well, for Cena, he's got to be Vanilla Ice, and let him do a rap. And Heyman looked at me like I had, as Jim Cornette would say, steaming turds hanging out of my mouth, and explained why the rap, if we saddle, his words, if you saddle this young man with a rap gimmick, we might as well put a bow on his career and bury him now. It will never get over, and he will die. I said, we have nothing else.
So let's kill
personality.
him.
What's that?
Yeah, this is funny. We have nothing else. What's wrong with killing him?
Well, what else are you going to do?
No,
I didn't believe he was great. He was great at rapping. And so we come back and we wrote it into the script, and that's a whole nother story one day on all the multiple scripts that were presented after that show. We all sat on a bus, came up with one show. Stephanie sat on the plane on the way home and came up with another show. Heyman came up with another show on his own. And I think by the time that we got to TV, I think Vince had 3 scripts that he was looking at and was livid that we weren't all together on the same page. But the one thing that was done that we knew that we had to do, because Vince loves the theme shows, was that we were going to do this Halloween thing. And I was dead set on making Cena a rapper. I was dead set on letting him do shit. So Cena and I are walking down the hallway, and we open up a door to go into another hallway, and there's Vince McMahon. I said to John, cut a rap on Vince. And Cena, without hesitation, just blistered Vince McMahon with a rap. And talked about his hair, talked about his suits, talked about his announcing, and I mean, just blistered him. And Vince laughed his ass off. And I was like, God damn, that's great. Who wrote that? John, real shy. Well, I just came up with it. I don't write them. I just spit them. No, who wrote that? That's good shit.
Did you just say, I just spit them?
Yes. Whatever the fuck they say. I don't know what the fuck he said. But he did, he did tell him that he would just come up with shit off the top of his head. And so we did the Vanilla Ice shit, and then it kind of grew from there. But John did his own raps. But it was that moment in the hallway that Vince heard him and went, holy shit, this guy's talented. And God, Paul Heyman hated it. Heyman hated it. Everybody did. They thought, you're going to kill him with a rapper gimmick. There's no white rappers. I said, that's why he'll be a heel. It'll be great. Just let him bust on everybody. So that's how the rap gimmick was born.
JR has said that he didn't really understand this gimmick, and even Vince McMahon himself, a white kid out of Westbury into hip hop, that's a little different. But his friends and family said that's really him. And once this happens, he's kind of transformed his look. Instead of this white meat baby face wearing the local team colors, now he's a white kid acting like a hip hop guy. So he's got flat bill hats that are backwards and a chain around his neck. And, he's wearing the jean shorts. He's got the old school Reebok pumps that he would make a spectacle of, pumping them up during the match. And at the time, this was a really big deal. He was wearing the Mitchell and Ness throwback jerseys, and that became a big part of his character. What do you remember about his idea or someone's idea of wearing the old throwback jerseys?
That was all John's idea to get heat. He would go in, and whoever the local market that we were in, he would pick their biggest rival and have jerseys to come out and antagonize the crowd. So that was all John. And it was John who wrote his own stuff, and he would work with writers sometimes to get around different things and make sure that they were palatable for television. But the look, the feel, all that stuff, that was Cena.
Talking about the Halloween episode again, somewhere I read that you guys presented him with 2 options. You can either come as Eminem or Vanilla Ice, and he picked Vanilla Ice. Do you remember there being a conversation that he would have tried to portray like Eminem, like an 8 Mile type character instead?
No, I think because it was my idea. I always remember because the only rapper I knew was Vanilla Ice, quite frankly. So
I love you for that. You're the whitest dude I know, but a minute ago you said, no, he didn't write them down. He would just spit them. I don't know why, but Bruce Prichard saying he would just spit them is outstanding to me.
Or shizzle dizzle, you know.
That's not something people do anymore.
50 Shades of Grey,
Okay.
beat that booty like Hulk Hogan.
Okay, let's move along. You know, one rap song. I love you for that.
Lil Yachty.
I
I even know his name.
don't know what's going on.
I saw Lil Yachty. I'm sorry, folks. Sidebar here. I saw Lil Yachty on the Jimmy Fallon show the other day rap all of the Simpson characters, and I was so excited because I go, I know him. I know that one.
That one. His college buddies would say that John Cena was freestyling even back in college, and he would do battle raps with guys and even like perform his raps in college bars. And I guess that kind of makes sense considering, you know, his rewinded gimmick that he would do in promos from OVW, does it not?
Yeah, but it was simply, he had such confidence when he was rapping. It was almost like he would kind of throw his shoulders back and be comfortable and had an extra swagger that when he was rapping, man, he was in his own element.
So the heel turns was kind of set in motion before the discovery of this rapping gimmick or after? But I know they did Rebellion in between. Do you discover this on the way to do the Rebellion show or on the way back? Is that when so he had already turned heel on SmackDown and now just through a happy accident would give him this rapping gimmick on the way home?
Happy accident on the way home.
Isn't that
happy
amazing?
Accident. I happened to hear him on the plane and asked him to do more shit. And then that fate of being in the hallway with Vince and him tearing Vince up.
What are the odds? I mean, it feels like since the heel turn had already started, but it doesn't really happen until the trip for the Rebellion pay-per-view that you guys come up with the rap gimmick. When he came back, if he had come back and not displayed his rap skill, would he have just been a heel by wearing, you know, the Cowboys colors in Philadelphia? Would he have just went the other way with it?
I mean, really and truly, who knows? But I'm glad that I'm glad the rapping gimmick happened because it was something that everybody could sink their teeth into.
Now, the rumor and innuendo would be, oh, well, this happened and then he was pushed to the moon, but that's not exactly what happened. On October 30th, he would work a match for OVW and then he would be back on SmackDown on November 21st. So almost a month after he's been off of SmackDown TV. And when he comes back, Rikishi beats him. But a week later, John Cena and Matt Hardy would team up to defeat Edge and Rey Mysterio. A couple of days after that, though, he's working a velocity match, but at least he gets a win over John DiNucci. December 5th, we would see Rikishi and John Cena battle in a rap contest. And this is really the first time since Halloween that he had been able to display this in a featured way. His gimmick at this point is he's going to start walking to the ring and doing a rap about his opponent or the town he's in, just to kind of run down the crowd and opponents, kind of old school Jerry Lawler heel style. But it gets over, and he does it so well that it's not too much longer that people actually start cheering. What do you remember about his battle rap with Rikishi?
I remember that in my opinion, he killed Rikishi, and he actually helped the writers write Rikishi's rap. But Rikishi kind of fancied himself as a gangster rapper. And I think in with John, I thought John just ate him up from delivery and material and everything else. And in his mind, he thought that, he was getting Rikishi over, but he just ate him up because he was just so much better on his delivery and his comfort with it. Rikishi was trying to remember shit and Cena had created it. So it was coming out natural for him. And John just found his niche here.
He really did. December 7th, John Cena would defeat Paul London. And then somewhere in here, you guys put him with Bull Buchanan, who is now renamed B2 or B squared. Why were these two put together? This feels kind of hodgepodge.
Well, Bull Buchanan was another OVW standout that we were looking to do something with and trying to bring him in, and thought if John had a bodyguard or a counterpart for him to take the bumps and somebody that you could beat, Bull Buchanan would be good. So we brought Bull in, put him with John, and can't call him Bull Buchanan, so he's just B squared. Get it, B square?
Yeah, I get it. It feels like a name that Vince McMahon would have loved.
He did. You had to explain it to him, but yeah.
Ah, God, that's good shit. Because the B, the double B, Eddie, oh, God, that's good shit. What kind of titties does he have?
It feels like he would be the type who was encouraging bad behavior, and he would say, "Don't be a square, pal." And because he's so like King's English, old school with it. I don't know. It's hilarious.
You know.
December 19th, SmackDown, John Cena would defeat Chuck Palumbo, and then on Velocity, he would repeat it 9-10 days later, John Cena over Chuck Palumbo. January 2nd, 2003, we would start SmackDown off with John Cena defeating Rikishi. This is after some interference from B Squared. And then later in the show, Cena would attack Eddie Guerrero with a chain, causing Eddie to lose his match. So now we're going to see John and Eddie programmed together here. How does Eddie feel about being positioned with John Cena? Obviously, Eddie can make anybody look good. What was his take on John Cena?
You know what? Eddie liked working with John Cena, and he liked John as a person. So when you like somebody outside of the ring and you can make money with him in the ring, that's a good marriage. And Eddie liked John outside of the ring. They got along, and he was entertained by Cena's rap and stuff and felt that he could do something with him.
Cena would get a win over Chavo, but then lose to Eddie with a frog splash. And then the following week, the Los Guerreros would defeat Cena and B Squared to retain their tag titles. And after the match, Cena turned on B Squared with the help from a new sidekick, Red Dog, the former Rodney Mack. Any memories of putting Rodney in this pairing?
Yeah, we thought that Rodney was a more rounded worker than Bull Buchanan, and that they could, do a lot more tag team matches, and that Rodney could probably spin off on his own. And it was just, it was an experiment. Let's try Rodney Mack here, who I always thought was a great talent and somebody that we kind of missed the boat on.
Let's talk about the Royal Rumble 2003. It's January 19th. It's at the Fleet Center in Boston, and Cena enters the Royal Rumble at the number 18 spot, and he doesn't eliminate anyone, but he is eliminated by The Undertaker, and Brock Lesnar winds up winning the match by last eliminating The Undertaker. With this being Cena's kind of hometown of Boston, was there any consideration giving to pushing him a little bit here, or was this still the kind of jury still out on him and he's just lucky to have a job as the rapping kid?
Jury was definitely still out on him, and he wasn't over to the point yet that really anybody was paying attention to any of that stuff.
Just for funsies, I should mention on February 8th, 2003, John Cena has a match on Velocity with a newcomer by the name of Bryan Danielson. How fun is that? Now they're going to be brothers-in-law.
Brother-in-law, yeah.
February 13th, 2003, we would see Brock Lesnar defeat John Cena and then give Cena an F5 into the ring post, injuring his knee. And the gimmick here is we're going to give Cena a little time off. What's the reason for giving him some time off? Was he injured, or did you guys just want to kind of press pause to freshen him up?
I think he had a bad ankle at the time. I'm not sure, but it was an injury. And I think it was an ankle, but we did the F5 to give him a little time and get him rested. It was like a sprained ankle or something.
Cena's back on March 27th, 2003, and here he defeats Rikishi after nailing an amazing Death Valley driver, which he still uses to this day. Who do you recall suggesting that he start using the Death Valley driver as a finisher?
I actually think it was Dean Malenko who came up with it and said, "Hey, try this." And John did it well and was safe doing it. That's my recollection. I think it was Dean that showed him how to do it, and I thought he did it good.
Any feedback from calling it the FU?
No.
It's a different time in the company, is it not?
No shit.
After the match, Cena goes backstage and finds Brock Lesnar, and they brawl until Kurt Angle breaks a 2x4 over Brock's back. Is Richie Posner setting that 2x4 up?
You know, Daddy.
April 3rd, 2003 on SmackDown, we would see John Cena defeat Eddie Guerrero in the first round of a number one contender tournament. And then the second week, he would defeat The Undertaker in round 2. This feels like a really, really big deal to beat Eddie Guerrero and The Undertaker in consecutive weeks. What's changed here in the way we're wanting to position John Cena? This is a guy who, was working Velocity a few weeks ago, and now he's going over Eddie and Undertaker in a tournament.
God damn, did you see his arms? The veins, the vascularity. Must beat everyone.
I just think it was a change in time, and the rap gimmick was getting over. And I tell you where we wanted to go and where we eventually went was with Cena and Undertaker, which we just sat there and thought, "Ooh, God, this can be good."
Yeah, I think everybody thought that. April 17th, 2003, we see John Cena defeat Chris Benoit in the finals of the number one contender tournament. So on his way up here, in 3 consecutive weeks, he beat Eddie Guerrero, Undertaker, and now Chris Benoit. The following week, he gets a win over Rhino. And then later in the night, after Brock Lesnar defeats A-Train, John Cena would attack Brock and now hit his Death Valley driver. He's doing this in retaliation for using the F5 into the post. Backlash is set. April 27th, 2003 is the first time we would see Brock Lesnar and John Cena in a world title match on pay-per-view, and Lesnar gets the win. What do you remember most about Backlash 03?
From my memory, it just was, I thought, too soon. I thought it was too soon to put those two guys together, and without having a definitive, where are we going to go from here with them? Because we weren't going to go with them really beyond that. And it just was too much too soon. I liked John's push. I liked the way that we got there. But when you get there, it's a little bit of a letdown. For me personally, it was.
So Cena goes from headlining the pay-per-view for the world title against Brock Lesnar to the next pay-per-view, Judgment Day 03. He's tagging with Johnny Stamboli and Chuck Palumbo to take on Spanky, Chris Benoit, and Rhino. What the fuck is this?
Yeah, it was simply...
We don't have anything for these guys. Throw them in there. Yeah, and you finish up with that. That was my point. You finish up with Brock and the championship, and again, it was just so. Wasn't anything to write home about. And instead of going kind of where we wanted to go with Undertaker at that point, it was like, no, not yet. That's what you get stuck with. Around the same time, we see the fun segment, or at least I enjoyed it. I want to ask what you thought of some other ones, but I really dug when Kendrick comes out and does a battle rap. I think at the time he called himself, now of course on the indies he was Spanky. He's Brian Kendrick here, but he comes out and he calls himself Spanky, and he's rapping in this big oversized, outfit that Cena would wear. It's like a velour jumpsuit of sorts with this big bucket hat. And Baby Hebner does the beatbox for him. And Cena just says, "Hey, white boy, give me a beat." And Baby Hebner shows off some pretty impressive beatboxing skills. What'd you think of this segment in particular, and the way they were able to kind of tell a story in the few minutes they had?
I thought it was absolutely fabulous because it was something, again, it was a skill that Brian Hebner had that he would do to entertain the boys in the back. And we found out, hey, wait a minute. Damn, Spanky can go too. So it was something from real life that had taken place in the back that entertained the hell out of the boys. And if you can entertain the boys, chances are you're going to be able to entertain the masses with it. So it was something, I think Cena is the one that brought it to our attention. Oh my God, you got to hear Brian Hebner. And then you got to hear Spanky. And then it was like, put that shit on TV.
You probably enjoyed the one with Funaki though, right? When he spelled out UGLY, you ain't got no alibi.
Of course.
Funaki has introduced something into your life that you shared with me. Do you want to tell everybody about the miracle?
Which miracle? The eye drops?
Oh my gosh. Smarten everybody up on these Japanese eye drops that you carry around everywhere you go.
The single greatest eye drops. It's like Altoids for the eyes, folk. And you can only get them in Japan. And my good friend Sho Funaki, every time that he would go to Japan, would come back with a case of these things. And the best way to describe it is once you place them in your eyes, it's like about 1,000 ice cubes and 4 little tiny people about the size of ants massaging your eyeballs. And they are absolutely incredible.
Is there anything else you want to share with our listeners who may not have put it together about you and Funaki?
Indeed.
I don't think a lot of people know that you were the guy who did that. I just thought that was fun to share. So if you didn't know, now you know. June 5th, 2003, we would see John Cena defeat Chris Benoit after Rhino accidentally hit Benoit with a chain. And to celebrate his 1 year in the WWE, on June 26, 2003, John Cena would issue an open challenge and Orlando Jones would accept. And John, of course, gets the victory. This is kind of one of the more interesting debut years for a wrestler in that he debuts against Kurt Angle. He worked stuff with Chris Jericho. He has an opportunity to work a program with Brock Lesnar. He won a title tournament that included Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero and The Undertaker. What a year. Am I right?
I thought he had a great year. You know, we're talking about it 16 years later. So, hey, I thought he had a great year.
Let's keep going here. On July 3rd, Billy Gunn would beat John Cena. This was for the United States title tournament. The Undertaker offered the assist here. And then on July 27th in 2003 at Vengeance, we would see The Undertaker defeat John Cena with the last ride powerbomb. At this point, was there ever any consideration to having John Cena go over to kind of solidify him as a main event player? Or was that just too soon?
I think it was too soon, and leading up to it, some of those vignettes that we did with Cena pissing on Undertaker's bike in the graveyard. Here's a sidebar story for you. We do the vignettes with Cena in the graveyard, and I get a call the day after that we shot the vignette. We shoot the vignettes, 1 o'clock in the morning and so on and so forth. And I get a call the next day that the funeral or the grave site, the cemetery that we used, was beside themselves that the guy let us use that cemetery and you'll never use my cemetery again, and you disrespected it, and so on and so forth. After we hang up with him, somebody walks into us with a newspaper, and this cemetery that we had used going all the way back to 1990 was stacking bodies, which is highly illegal. And the fact that they always were so damn accommodating, digging holes for us and moving things around for us and all this other crap. These guys had been stacking bodies for over 100 years. And so you would go, and after so many years, they would just take the headstone down, resell the plot, and then dig the holes deeper and just stack bodies on top of each other. They're in Stamford, Connecticut. So that was our last cemetery shoot in Stamford.
It's hard to find a good funeral director these days. It's a shame Paul Bear's not with us anymore.
This is true.
What would Paul Bear say about stacking bodies like that?
Oh, yes, it's the bottom line. Oh, yes.
August 28th, 2003, SmackDown in El Paso would show Eddie Guerrero defeat John Cena by DQ to retain the U.S. title. At this point, Eddie Guerrero is over like Rover, and in El Paso, he's the big deal. Any memories of this match in particular?
Oh, holy shit. This was one when Eddie was U.S. champion, and again when Eddie was the WWF champion, where Eddie's return to El Paso, we turned away thousands and thousands of people. And I remember driving around for this particular one in a convertible lowrider outside the arena so that everybody that couldn't get in could at least get to see Eddie Guerrero. And it was just magical because that was Eddie's hometown, and the Guerrero family in El Paso and in Juarez, Mexico, they walked on water. So this was an incredible night for Eddie Guerrero. And it was an incredible night for Cena to have that much heat going into that match.
In a big match on September 11th, 2003, we would see on SmackDown Eddie Guerrero beat John Cena in the Latino street fight. Chavo would interfere. September 25th, we would see John Cena attack Kurt Angle, who would then bolt in a getaway car, and Kurt Angle would come after him. This would culminate on October 2nd, when we would see John Cena and Brock Lesnar team against Kurt Angle and The Undertaker, but Cena would knock Angle out with a chain, and the only way to settle that is 1 week later, on October 9th, 2003, Kurt Angle and John Cena battle rap. What'd you think of Kurt Angle's battle rap with John Cena?
Okay, here's what I found funny about it, was that the battle raps were written by the whitest white boys that you could ever imagine. Cena, of course, wrote his own stuff, and Kurt's was written, I believe, by Brian Gewirtz, with the help of John Cena in there as well. But Kurt, his comedic timing off the charts, and they had such good chemistry and great timing with one another that it's one of those moments that if you haven't seen it, go back and watch it, because it shows both Kurt Angle and John Cena at their best.
If you haven't already, go check Kurt Angle out in our archives. One of our more underrated episodes. Lots of good stuff in there. Check it out at MLWRadio.com. October 16th, 2003, Kurt Angle and John Cena get into a verbal confrontation, and this includes a little person dressed as Kurt Angle. Any memories of this? I'm always fascinated whenever the WWE dusts off a little person for these type of roles. It feels like somebody somewhere has a little person fetish, because they do this a lot.
Short sleeve. Samson. I say short sleeve. You say Samson. Short sleeve.
Samson.
Short sleeve.
Samson.
Short. That was Short Sleeve Samson that portrayed Kurt Angle, and I'll never forget talking to my brother Tom, who was helping book enhancement talent, different guys around the country, when we needed a hairless little person.
A hairless little person?
Well, yeah, because Kurt was bald. So you needed a hairless little person.
Oh, I thought you meant like a swimmer. Never mind.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. And he says, well, do they have to rap? Because not only that, I've got a hairless little person that raps. I say short sleeve. You say Samson, short sleeve.
Samson.
Okay. See, there you go.
Is that like the modern day version of Marco?
Mero.
Feels like it is. No Mercy. Kurt Angle, John Cena. This happens October 19th, 2003. We're going to break it down in long form at some point. Ultimately, Kurt Angle gets the win with an ankle lock into a heel hook. What did you think of this match?
I thought it was great. I thought that it was one of those that you see the growth in John Cena, and you get to see that, holy shit, we got something here.
Let's talk about what's next. We've got October 23rd. And this one would happen on SmackDown. John Cena and A-Train taking on Chris Benoit and Kurt Angle. It ended in a no contest, so they do it again the following week, except they kind of reshuffle a little bit with Kurt Angle and Chris Benoit taking on John Cena and A-Train. And this is where you see Cena and Train had kind of turned on each other. November 6, 2003, on SmackDown, we get John Cena defeating Rey Mysterio after a low blow and then an FU. And after the match, Paul Heyman would offer John Cena a spot on Team Lesnar at the Survivor Series. And then Cena got attacked by A-Train, which I guess turns Cena back babyface. What the hell's going on here?
Well, at this time, the crowd was getting behind Cena because he was so damn entertaining with his raps. And no different than The Rock previously, where no matter what Rock did trying to be a heel, that the crowd was entertained by him and they were cheering him. They were cheering John Cena and they were cheering his raps. So the decision was made, okay, they're going to cheer him. Let's just flip the script here a little bit and change the tune of his raps and who he's rapping on. Make him a babyface.
November 13th, we would have Chris Benoit and Cena take on and win Lesnar and the Big Show. So that's a big deal when you have the Big Show and Lesnar on the same side, but they go down, and it happens at the hands of Benoit and Cena. Next up, of course, is Survivor Series a few days later, November 16th. We'll cover that in long form sometime, I'm sure. This one's in Dallas, and Cena is on Team Angle, which consists of himself, Kurt Angle, Chris Benoit, Hardcore Holly, and Bradshaw, and they take on Team Lesnar, which is made out of Brock, Big Show, Matt Morgan, A-Train, and Nathan Jones. Is that the most meat on one side of a team ever before?
Would you want to meet any one of those 10 guys in an alley anywhere? That for a shoot is a badass team on both sides.
Cena, Kurt Angle, Chris Benoit, Hardcore Holly, and Bradshaw. Other side, Lesnar, Big Show, Matt Morgan, A-Train, and Nathan Jones. That's ridiculous, the roster at this time. Cena would hit Big Show with an FU to pin him, and then Cena and Angle are the eventual winners and sole survivors of the match. This is all really starting to kind of elevate Cena at this time. Is most of this due, in your opinion, to the crowd really digging the rap gimmick where he would kind of run the opponents down on the way to the ring? It feels like that most of all is what's responsible for the push here. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And Cena's in-ring work was getting a little better. He wasn't as clumsy. He was still clumsy, still had 2 left feet, but his work was getting better. And then you started to see the power. And this son of a bitch is what guys in the gym call cock strong. Cena is one strong son of a bitch. And to get Big Show up and do the FU on him, that's an impressive feat of strength. I don't give a shit who you are.
Vince McMahon on the DVD put over that John Cena actually squats barefoot, and that was like Cro-Magnon, and it wouldn't be a big deal to a lot of people, but it was a big deal to Vince. When did Vince first start to become impressed with Cena? I ask because they did a segment on the November 20th, 2003 SmackDown, and it feels like Vince is pretty selective with who he programs himself with.
I think that just, first of all, being able to see Cena in the gym and see that strength. But like I just said with Big Show, being able to manhandle another man that's 500 pounds, damn near 7 feet tall, that's impressive as shit. And Cena was able to get Rikishi up. He was able to get Big Show up. And he's just an impressively strong bastard, man. He's scary strong. Strong like bull.
Well, this November 20th, 2003 is kind of seen as like coming out party, I guess, because he's got this segment with Vince McMahon, and then in the main event, he defeats Big Show. A week later, he would defeat A-Train to qualify for the number 1 contenders battle royal later that night. And Cena and Benoit would end up as co-winners of the battle royal and face off the following week. It seems like you guys have done this co-winners thing a few times. Whose finish is that, and why is that one of their favorites?
I'm going to lean on, the original finish that I can remember, talking about like co-winners, and this wasn't a battle royal, but it was the Hogan Orndorff both dropping down in the cage at the same time, and you had the disputed winners. But Vince liked the controversy, and Vince liked to have controversy around things where both sides have an argument. To me, and I think from a fan point of view, if you've got a battle royal or something like that, why not just start the damn thing over and get a winner? It seems easy, but it was just for storyline purposes, and Vince kind of liked to lean on that from time to time to get an organic match.
December 4th, we would see that match. Benoit would defeat John Cena after interference from the Big Show, and this would get Benoit a title shot. The next week, John Cena and the Big Show would do a battle rap, and then Cena would kick him low. Here we see the Big Show dressed up kind of like Cena and actually doing a rap. And there's some pretty controversial stuff that the WWE does not put this stuff on the network for a reason. I don't care what anybody says, because Cena has been positioned as, what he is, an American hero, and doing all of these visits with charities and Make-A-Wish and I mean, he's the face of the company. So they don't want him in position here to have a lot of this stuff out there. So the two of the DVDs that they've put out on him that kind of highlight some of that salty language, is not on the network. But I mention this and make such a big deal about it because there's some sort of line in here, with Big Show where he says something like, in my world, you're the white girl and I'm Kobe Bryant. And it got a huge response. And obviously you could never say that today, but you guys got pretty edgy with this stuff. How do you think John Cena and Big Show did here in their battle rap?
I thought it was excellent. I thought both were extremely entertaining. And these are the things where Big Show shines that a lot of people don't always get to see the personality side of the Big Show. He's one of the funniest guys I've ever been around. He's pretty damn quick-witted, and his delivery and comic timing is great. So I thought it helped both guys shine and made it work.
No, he did make it work, and he made it work on the first trip to Iraq. The WWF first went to Iraq that year, and it was going to be the tribute to the troops, and they had done some stuff like this before, but this is the first time to Iraq, and Cena wanted to go and jumped at the chance to go. And while he's there, he does a battle rap, of course, or he does his rap, but then he has a match with Big Show, and they're pushing him in a big way here. Do you remember talking to Cena about this tribute to the troops show or what it meant to him?
I know that there were a lot of guys, and John being one of them. Bradshaw is the one who actually originally hooked up the very first tribute to the troops and the guys going over to Iraq. And a lot of guys, as many guys that wanted to go over, there were a lot of guys that didn't want to go over, that were concerned about their safety and didn't necessarily want to make that trip. There's a great story about Ron Simmons when they took the guys into a zone where there was a lot of fighting and there was a lot of stuff going on in Iraq, and they're in a helicopter and they've got cover on the helicopter, and the Army guys come on the helicopter and say, okay, now look, when you get off the helicopter, keep your head down, stay low. We will be on the outside and we're going to be shooting our guns off, but just be sure and stay low. We've got you covered. And Ron Simmons turns, looks at him and goes, damn, you know, I'd have sent any one of these motherfuckers an autographed picture. I'd be fine with that. You know, I'd personalize this shit and everything, but damn, the fuck I got to be shot at to go in and sign autographed pictures. Well, nobody comes in and sees these guys out here on the battlefield like this. Because, yeah, because nobody wants to get shot at, motherfucker. But there were guys that didn't want to do it, and then there were guys that did want to do it. And Cena was definitely one of those guys that was very patriotic and wanted to go over and see the troops, and he truly loved this stuff.
Well, let's talk about January 1st, 2004. It's New Year's Day. We've got SmackDown with Chris Benoit and John Cena defeating the FBI to gain entry into the Royal Rumble match. And then on the 15th, we would see Cena and Rhino in a wash your mouth out with soap match, which was set up by Chris Benoit. Talk me through this.
Oh, God. Just something different, something that hadn't been done before. So every kid, especially in my age bracket, was threatened with having their mouth washed out with soap at some point in their lives by their mother if you said a bad word. So why not do it on TV? You know, we've done Loser Eats a Can of Dog Food. We've done everything else under the sun. Why not a wash your mouth out with soap?
Chris Benoit would join in and put Paul Heyman in a sharpshooter while John Cena would feed him chunks of ivory soap.
First time that soap had touched that body in years.
I love you for that. January 22nd.
Whatever you do, sir, do not allow any mouthwash in my mouth.
Just saying.
January 22nd, Chris Benoit and Cena would defeat Rhino, Matt Morgan, Big Show, and Brock Lesnar. So now we're at the 04 Royal Rumble. This one goes down in Philadelphia. And we've got Cena coming in at number 28. For the second year in a row, he has no eliminations, but he does make it to the final 6 in the match, this time being eliminated by the Big Show. It seems kind of curious that Cena given what he would become, had 2 back-to-back Royal Rumble appearances and didn't eliminate anybody. Was there some sort of strategy or plan to that?
No reason. It probably just didn't fit at the time, anybody in there, and just didn't fit for him to eliminate anybody. No specific reason, per se.
February 4th, we would see Paul Heyman bench John Cena after the FCC crackdown on profanity on network television. Any memory of this angle?
Yeah, we were getting a lot of heat from people being on broadcast, because at the time, being on UPN, it was taboo, to use colorful language, and we were getting a little bit of heat for some of the risque language that we were using. So, okay, we're gonna adhere. We're gonna bench him for a little while.
And it was specifically
learn a new hold.
It was specifically John Cena's raps that got you guys in trouble.
A lot of his raps did, yeah. I think that was one of the things that was easy for people to point to, because they were always a little risque.
Did you think that you guys were pushing the envelope, or did you think it was within norms?
I think we always pushed the envelope, but I don't think that we were any more risque than some of the other network programming that was on at the same time. I just really don't. I thought that it was walking the line, but I don't think we crossed it.
The next week we've got Eddie Guerrero and John Cena defeating Brock Lesnar and Big Show when Eddie pinned Brock, and now we're set for No Way Out, No 4, and this is where we would see Kurt Angle defeat Big Show and John Cena in a triple threat match to become the #1 contender for WrestleMania 20. And of course we're going to have Eddie Guerrero and Kurt Angle square off at WrestleMania 20. Any consideration at that point in having John Cena win and become the #1 contender? Or was the thinking, he hasn't won a secondary title yet, he can't jump straight to the world title?
The thinking simply was that he wasn't ready for it at that time, and Vince did feel that Cena was the type of character that had to earn his stripes along the way, and wanted him to either be the United States champion or Intercontinental champion before he's competing for the WWF champion.
In your opinion, does he think that way based on the size of the competitor, or what is it about him that makes him say you have to earn it?
The overall just feeling of the guy. I think that with John, the way that he started out, and then the rap gimmick and everything else, I just think that overall there's different strokes for different folks. And for Cena, that's how he felt about John Cena. He felt that the people wanted Cena to earn it, and wanted him to earn it. There's some guys that you can just put out there and shock by getting the championship. Jinder Mahal is a great example of that. Hey, let's shock him. We did it with the great Khali as well, and some others. But for Cena, he saw Cena as a long-term investment and wanted him to earn his stripes.
February 19th, we got Kurt Angle and John Cena defeating the Basham brothers. I don't know when we'll talk about them again. Got any good Basham brother stories you could share with us?
Well, Doug Basham is Danny Davis's brother-in-law. One time, I think he was married to or engaged to Gail Kim. And Danny Basham was, "Damage you, motherfucker. In OVW, he's the greatest rapper of all time." And that was actually his gimmick. Damaja was Danny Basham, that Cornette was in love with and felt that he should have had the rapping gimmick.
In the March 4th Figure 4 Weekly, it was reported that John Cena did an interview on Between the Ropes Radio, and Alvarez would write that John Cena indicated that he had torn his ACL taking a bump at the Royal Rumble, but was happy because it could have actually been a lot worse. And he says that he was going to be limited as to what he could do in the ring. Obviously, that's not good for his WrestleMania payday. He says he was contemplating bringing back the Iron Claw as a finisher because he thought it was a throwback move that would go with his throwback jersey. What did you think about this idea of a throwback finisher? Was he just trolling these guys, or was there any sort of real talk that John Cena may bring back the Iron Claw?
No, I think he was just trolling these guys because, especially knowing how Vince feels about the claw as a finish being one of the hokiest moves in the wrestling business. He was not a fan, and this sounds like something that John may have just been having fun with.
And he also says in the interview that the real life John Cena wore the same stuff that the John Cena on TV wore. Now, these days he dresses a little different, but not much. Was that fairly accurate that back in 03, 04, the Cena you saw on TV is the real life Cena?
100% accurate.
He even had in a lot of his merchandise, the number 54 on his jerseys and his merch was his real football number 54, right?
Correct.
What do you remember about the scare for the torn ACL and how that would affect him at WrestleMania 19? Because of course he's at WrestleMania 19, and he did a really hokey rap situation where they had did like an open challenge to rappers anywhere. And this is the one in Seattle, and no one takes him up on it. So he comes out in his WrestleMania jumpsuit and then has Jay-Z's head on an Austin Powers body cardboard cutout, and then Fabulous's head on a mini-me Austin Powers cardboard cutout. And he does his raps and kicks him off of there, and then he's out of there. It's kind of an underwhelming WrestleMania debut for one of the greatest superstars of all time, is it not?
Well, that wasn't the original idea was to actually have a battle rap, and I believe, oh my God, he's on the CSI show. Bald guy, rapper.
Ice Cube?
Not Ice Cube, but it was
Ice-T?
Not Ice-T.
Pitbull?
I gotta look it up. This is gonna drive me nuts.
LL Cool J?
LL Cool J was supposed to be the one that we did the battle rap with, and it was supposed to be LL Cool J and I believe Snoop, and they were going to come out and do this, and it all fell apart as we got closer to it.
Why did you guys think they would really do that?
LL Cool J wanted to work. I mean, he wanted to have a match, and he and Shane had talked back and forth, and it was then just conflict of schedules. Couldn't make it happen.
Yeah. What happened is he didn't want to get out there and ruin any sort of rap credibility he had by letting a professional wrestler out rap him.
Well, we wouldn't have let that happen.
Sure. Okay. So now we're ready for WrestleMania 20. This is where we're getting to. I just wanted to kind of compare and contrast WrestleMania 19 and WrestleMania 20. I guess my follow-up to 19 is, if you know the rap isn't going to happen, why not find something else for him to do if you really thought he had a shot to be something?
Well, because we kept trying all the way till the very last minute to get somebody there and do it as a surprise, and everybody just kept falling through. We had Snoop Dogg on the hook, and then he fell through, and it just, we kept hoping that somebody was going to show up and do it.
Well, here we are, WrestleMania 20. This one went down in Madison Square Garden. It took place on March 14th, 2004. And of course, as we remember, this is when John Cena finally earns gold. He defeats the Big Show to capture the United States Championship. Now, a year prior at WrestleMania 19, he had vowed that he would be in the main event of WrestleMania. He's actually in the opener here, but he is beating the Big Show, and he is putting all 500 pounds on his shoulders and giving him his finish. And the crowd is into his rap to start the show. Cena appeared to be very excited about this. The crowd was clearly behind him with lots of "Let's go Cena" and "Big Show sucks" chants. Eventually we see Cena go ahead and wrap a chain around his fist and tell the ref he's going to punch Show out. The ref says no. So John throws the chain on the mat. The ref goes to pick it up, and as he does, Cena puts on brass knuckles instead and punches Show in the head. He gets another FU, and it's over. The crowd goes crazy for this, and Cena is selling it like he's won a title that really means something. Alvarez would write, "Definitely better than I expected, 3 1/4 stars." Now, what'd you think of this match at WrestleMania 20 and the coronation of John Cena as a single star here?
I thought it was great, and I thought that the Big Show did a great job of making Cena fight for it and really making him feel like a champion. And it is actually a very good observation that Cena made that win and made that championship look like it was something special. It wasn't a secondary title. It was everything to him. So, opening up WrestleMania is an honor, and to be on the card in and of itself is an honor. But that first match is just as important as the last match. And for those guys to be picked to open up the show and set it on the right note is why it was put in that position and kind of to anoint Cena going forward.
Well, this is when he wins the regular U.S. title, of course, but they soon debut the spinning title after he wins it. When did you guys have the idea for a spinning main plate on a championship belt?
I think it was a combination of John Cena and Vince trying to come up with something that would be unique to John Cena. And, you have the turntables that spin, wah, 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 and if the U.S. title was a spinner belt, that's kind of how they came up with it. And the simple fact that John was a babyface, it was a unique belt, and they felt that the merchandising would be through the roof, and it was.
Did you really think that the spinner was based on a turntable?
It was.
It wasn't based on a spinning wheel on a car, a rim?
Well, I always looked at it as a turntable.
I love you, white guy. No, it was based on spinning rims. At the time, they were really big. Latrell Sprewell was one of the first guys out there who had it, and the concept was you would have...
Is he a rapper?
Your main wheel. I love you for that. And then you have the part on the outside that spins. Nobody uses them anymore, but they were really, really over at that time. What did you think of the spinning center plate? JR has been critical of it. A lot of old school guys were pretty critical of this not being a traditional style belt, especially when you think about the history that the United States belt had.
I hated it. I absolutely hated it. But at the end of the day, they sold a ton of them in merchandising, but I hated it. I did not like the design. I didn't like the spinning of it. And for all the reasons, I like the traditional championship being something that everybody was gunning for.
Let's talk about some of the elements that Cena used to create his character here. He called his fans the Chain Gang. Do you know if that's something he came up with or something that somebody in creative would have come up with? This stems from him wearing a chain around his neck. At the time, rappers were wearing lots of gold and bling chains. I guess rappers still do. But that's when the craze was kind of kicking into high gear. But a generation before, the Junkyard Dog came to the ring with a chain around his neck, and Hercules Hernandez in the WWF carried a chain to the ring. Whose idea was using the chain and calling his fans the Chain Gang?
I think it was just something that organically happened from his raps and something that he wrote and kind of caught on.
Was this a strategic idea when he's wearing all of the throwback jerseys to then instead put him in the throwback logo with the F chopped off? Is that something that someone from merchandising comes up with, or is that John Cena's own throwback idea?
Well, it was Cena's idea to do the throwback logo so that he could sell merchandise, because he wasn't making any money off of doing the throwback jerseys of all the teams and stuff.
Right.
So his idea was, let's do a throwback with the logo, but he wanted to get the royalties from it. It was his idea and it was his stuff. So him wearing it, that was his idea to make money off of.
The Doctor of Thugonomics, is that also from a rap, or is that something you guys wanted to try to brand?
Same, just kind of stuff that he would come up with when he was out in the ring that caught on.
Is there a wink and a nod in creative when somebody comes up with the 5-knuckle shuffle? Because that's obviously the name of a move that John Cena does, but it's also the name of a move that Tony Schiavone does.
Yeah, that was definitely a shout out to Tony Schiavone.
You recognize that I'm making a joke there.
Yeah, I know. So was I. Mine was funnier.
Well, it's debatable. So I guess
so is Tony Schiavone.
My question is, would you guys give another move to, I don't know, Kane And let's say that Kane gets in the ring and the commentator yells, "Hey, it's time for the beat off. Hey, it's time for the whack job. Hey, look at him, give him that hand job." I mean, the 5-knuckle shuffle is innuendo for, what Tony Schiavone does anytime Medusa's on TV.
Well, you also have to understand that some of the people that were writing and or listening to some of this stuff were not really that hip on things.
That's what I wanted to hear.
Entendres and different things. It's no different than The Godfather when he would talk about, roll that blunt and light that blunt up, and they thought that a blunt was a cigar.
Here's what I'm wanting you to do, and I feel like you're making me fucking beg for it. Will you tell me the story of how Brian Gerwitz pitched Vince McMahon on the 5-knuckle shuffle and everybody looking at each other like the old man doesn't know we're talking about beating off? And you just won't give it to me.
Well, no, because I think it was simply Cena saying it and naming it, and they got to it, and he's like, you gotta love that 5-knuckle shuffle. God, if only I could do the 5-knuckle shuffle more often. Not really real. You know what I mean? Not putting 2 and 2 together.
Thank you. God, that was hard, man. That's what I've been digging.
I gotta make it work for us sometimes.
It's not fun. Not after 3 hours. You Can't See Me, has come out that was really just him ribbing on a brother who was kind of a professional moper. And he added the phrase, "You can't see me." But the hand gesture thing was kind of borrowed from an Inside Family joke. And then "You Can't See Me." Do you remember when that became a thing? Was anybody for it? Was anybody against it? Or is it just one of those silly things that caught on?
It's a silly thing that caught on. And when you talk about the brother and the "You can't see me" and the hand gesture in the old family films that we had of the family growing up, that's something that John did with his brothers. And he would do that thing in front of his face to his brother. That was in some of those home movies. So he incorporated it and incorporated the "You Can't See Me," and it was born.
Who names the FU and the STFU? The STF, by the way, and then adding the U to the end is genius.
I think it was Paul Heyman.
That's great. Well, anything else we can touch on as we kind of wrap up the rise of John Cena? We promised we would cut it off at WrestleMania 20, but we did briefly touch on the belts. By the way, that spinning belt was made by Joe Marshall. J-Mar is the name in the belt community. As far as I know, there haven't been many of those made and almost none out in the wild. But if you have a picture of a ring-used spinner, hey, tweet it to me. I'd love to see it because those are a moment in time that we probably won't see anytime soon. Hey, it's Conrad. He is at Bruce Prichard. Our show, of course, is at Prichard Show. And our show today was brought to you by Carvana. If you're looking to unsuck the experience of going to the dealership, then Carvana can help, man. With Carvana, you can browse, buy, trade in, even finance your next vehicle online, all from the comfort of your home. Choose as soon as next day delivery. You hear me? Next day delivery. Or pick up your vehicle from the world's first coin-operated car vending machine.
Tito's and soda with a lemon and lime. I'll drink some red wine, or I'll have a beer. I don't do shots. So I was drinking, and Cena ordered shots and demanded everybody do shots. And so I did the old Ric Flair, and I dumped my shot in a plant underneath the bar. And I got caught. John was highly offended that I would dump one of his shots. It was actually a Dirty Sanchez that had tequila in it. I especially don't do well on tequila either.
But you're a big fan of the Dirty Sanchez?
Well, So John got double shots, and watched me as I shot the doubles. And then we did more shots, and then we did more shots, and then we did more shots. And it is the one time in my entire career that I ever overslept and missed a flight. In 44 years, one time that I missed a flight because I didn't wake up. I don't remember going to bed. All I remember was waking up, still in my suit with my tie still tied, with my shoes on, underneath the covers, and like tucked in underneath the covers. My briefcase that I do remember, I never got back to my room to put my briefcase up because I went right to the bar. My briefcase was in my room with a cell phone on top of it. When I got up and I look around and I look at the clock, we're in San Diego and it's 2:30 in the afternoon. My flight was at 6:30 in the morning. And I'm like, what the hell happened? My head is screaming. And I look over and everything is nice and neat in my room. And I go, oh, God, thank God they got my phone. It wasn't my phone. It was somebody else's phone. Someone else had lost their phone that night. He thought it was my phone, put it on my briefcase, when my phone was actually apparently in my briefcase that I didn't find for 2 days. And finally got home and called John. I said, you know what? You got me. You're the only person that has ever made me black out and miss a flight in all these years in the wrestling business. So John Cena can hang. He can hang.
Is that the same time you pulled a gun on the writers?
No.
Because you blacked out when we were taping that episode too. Hey, hypothetically, how would
not from drinking.
How would Jim Cornette rap John Cena's original theme?
And I
music?
didn't miss any flights either that time either. And that was specific to that. I'm sorry. Jim Cornette. Go ahead.
That's it. I asked the question. Now you answer.
I didn't hear it. Sorry.
Well, because you were talking, you fucking dickhead.
Well, I said I'm sorry, damn it.
Okay, you're forgiven. So we got a great idea on Twitter. What would it sound like if Jim Cornette rapped John Cena's original theme song, Basic Thugonomics?
So you think you're untouchable? Word live. This is Basic Thugonomics. Word live. I'm untouchable, but I'm forcing you to feel me. Whether fight or spitting, my discipline is unforgiving. Got you backing up in an offensive position. An ass-licking anthem, heavyweight or bantam. Holding caps or ransom. The microphone phantom. Teams hit the floor, this new the fight joint. Like a broken needle, kid, you're missing the point. We dominate your conference with offense, that's no offense. My theme song hits, get your reinforcements. We strike quick with hard kicks, ducking night sticks. Bare knuckle men through fight pits, beat you lifeless. Never survived this, you forgot like Alzheimer's. Never survived this, you forgot like Alzheimer's. Two-faced rappers walk away with four shiners. The raw rhymer turning legends to old timers. My incisors are like a viper biting through your one-liners. New Dead Man Inc., and we ain't about to make you famous. Taking over the earth, still kicking in your anus.
Wow.
Motherfucker.
We won't be able to beat that. Let's get to next week's poll. I can't believe this is a real thing, and that you did that, but kudos to you. If you haven't already, follow us on the show, man. We would love to have you go ahead and interact with us, vote on our poll, and then go ahead and send us some Twitter questions for whatever wins. He's on Twitter at Bruce Prichard. I'm on Twitter at Hey, it's Conrad. And the only way to follow the show is at Prichard Show. And don't forget, if you haven't already, cruise on over to our Facebook page. There's lots of silly videos there, and you can keep up with all things about us coming to your town. Specifically, I'm talking to you, Dallas, Philadelphia, Dublin, Manchester, London. Hit it up. It's facebook.com/something to wrestle. Bruce, are you ready for next week's poll?
I am ready for next week's poll.
All right, well, let's get it. Poll option number 1, Vengeance 2005. We had Shawn Michaels and Kurt Angle, Kane and Edge, a 3-way with Cena, Christian, and Jericho. And then in our main event, Batista and Triple H and a Hell in a Cell. What might we talk about if Vengeance 05 wins the poll?
Well, this is the match with Shawn Michaels and Kurt Angle, where Shawn famously came back afterwards and never wanting to work with Kurt Angle again because he was so damn stiff. And we'll talk about leading up to that match, the aftermath of that match, as well as all the great matches on this.
underrated characters. And I know lots of people think that this represents a bad time in wrestling, or they didn't like the character or whatever. But it is a fascinating character, and it's got lots of good stories in it. What might we talk about if Doink the Clown wins?
Who came up with the idea for Matt Bourne to be an evil clown? And the whole story behind it, and how we came up, and the idea behind bringing in an evil clown, not having a happy clown, and where the term "the clown is down" comes from.
Matt Bourne passed away on June 28th, which is why we put him on the poll here. So don't sleep on it. Doink the Clown is the one I'd like to cover this week. Poll option number 3, the rise of CM Punk. Punk actually debuted on June 24th, and then he won his first world title in the WWE, not counting the ECW belt, but he became the heavyweight champ, cashing in on June 30th, which is why he's on the poll this week. What might we talk about if we cover the rise of CM Punk?
Why CM Punk was snake bit from the very first time that he stepped into a WWF locker room, or WWE locker room, I guess, at the time. His time, we'll talk about his time in OVW and some of the old timers that he disagreed with there, as well as his rise and why it took so long for Punk to get to the top.
Last but certainly not least, one of the more debated topics of wrestling history, the invasion. Booker T versus Buff Bagwell happened in Tacoma, Washington on July 2nd, which is why it is a timely poll for us right now. Bruce, I feel like the invasion has been covered to death, but we get requests for it all the time. So if we do cover the invasion next week, what new information might you offer that's previously not been out there?
Wow, we've covered it an awful lot, but I think that we can talk about the plans and what Vince really saw in his vision going forward for the WCW brand, and the reasons why the invasion just simply didn't work.
So pay close attention. We're going to do 2 polls next week. This is going to confuse some folks, but Bruce is going to be going out of town on July 1st, and he won't be back until the 9th. So the following week, we will not be able to tape a show. So we're going to tape 2 shows this next week. One that you're going to get next Friday on June 30th, and then the show you're going to get on July 7th. So as soon as the first poll finishes, we're coming right back with the second poll. So don't sleep on this. This will be something that slips through a lot of people's radar, but we're covering it right now well in advance. Go vote on not only the first poll, but the second poll as well, because we've got 2 going up. So let's go ahead and run down the topics for the one after that. And this will be the show for July the 7th. So you won't hear this on June 30th. This is July the 7th. Hopefully everybody's got that. So let's run through it. We've got poll topic number 1, adorable Adrian Adonis. Adrian died on the 4th of July. He's probably most famous for his flower shop segments that he did, and of course his situation at WrestleMania 3 with Roddy Piper. What might we talk about if Adrian Adonis were to win the poll?
Well, not only his time in the WWF, but also, Adrian Adonis was one of those guys that made a claimant to the one and only undisputed World Heavyweight Championship that he won at the Summit in Houston, Texas for Southwest Championship Wrestling. A very storied career.
And July 4th, man, is not a good day in the wrestling business. Gorilla Monsoon's son, Joey Morella, would also pass away on the 4th of July, also in a car accident, the same as Adrian Adonis. So be thinking about that. Another bad thing that happened on the 4th of July, Brutus the Barber Beefcake was hit in the face, and his career was in jeopardy in a big, big way in that parasailing accident. What might we talk about if Brutus the Barber Beefcake were to win our poll next week?
Oh, man, we got to talk about his extremely great career throughout the whole time in WWE, from coming in as a male stripper to his transformation of the barber and those classic barber vignettes. He wasn't just a barber, he was a style.
And he said that very, very interesting. Poll topic number 3, In Your House Canadian Stampede. We get this request all the time. One of the best pay-per-views of 1997. If you haven't seen this show in a while, go ahead and check out the main event. The heat is off the charts. It happened on July 6, 1997. What might we cover if In Your House Canadian Stampede wins the poll?
This, folks, I'm going to tell you right now, I want this to win the poll. And there's so many great stories about the infighting and backstage fighting with the Hart family and what transpired leading up to this. The great stories that were being told with the Harts as heels in the U.S. and everywhere else, and heroes in Canada. The rise of Stone Cold Steve Austin. Absolutely one of the best old school pay-per-views of all time.
So check it out. That is poll topic number 3. And last but certainly not least, Muhammad Hassan, a controversial angle after the bombing in London and the situation that happened on SmackDown that got the WWE in all kinds of hot water, happened on July 13th. Muhammad Hassan, one of the more controversial characters. We get lots of questions about what his treatment was like backstage, why the character happened, was it in good taste, who was for it, who was against it, is it just Sergeant Slaughter WrestleMania 7 Part 2? What might we talk about if Muhammad Hassan wins the poll?
Well, we're going to talk about all that stuff that you just said, including the controversial vignettes that we did, where we did them, and the controversy surrounding all of that before the guy was ever even introduced, and what really led to his demise.
So don't forget, you've got a job to do this week, kids. We need you to vote twice. We're taping 2 episodes this week because Bruce is traveling. Adrian Adonis, Brutus the Barber Beefcake, In Your House Canadian Stampede, and Muhammad Hassan. One of those is going to go up on Friday, July the 7th. But as we said, the one that's more pressing, the one that's coming up right after this, is Vengeance 05, Doink the Clown, The Rise of CM Punk, and The Invasion. Cruise on over to @Prichard Show and throw your vote down right now. And don't forget to check us out on Facebook. We want to see you in Dallas at WHWLive.com. We want to see you in Philadelphia, and that's going to happen right before Battleground. And if you're across the pond, Bruce is coming to your neck of the woods. Dublin, Manchester. What are you waiting for? London. Get lined up. Go to Facebook.com/something to wrestle. Anything we want to mention before we get out of here, Bruce?
You know what? I think we've covered it all, and looking forward to seeing everybody in our live shows, and just get after it, man. It's all been good.
We'll see you next time right here on Something to Wrestle. I didn't say with that time. I thought you were going to say with.
Well, why didn't you say with? And you never say Bruce Prichard at the right time either.
Okay, let me try it again. Something to Bruce Prichard.
I like that.
Something to Bruce Prichard on MLWRadio.com.
And now a moment from the Something to Wrestle With Bruce Prichard archives. Episode 26, Kurt Angle.
Throw it in your Google machine. No, yeah. Roll Tide on that. That's not. Well, then it's Daniel Peters' turn. What happened, Bruce?
And yes, I had a huge part in it. It was just that old school wanting to prove a point. By God, you young whippersnappers, you want to be in this business. You're not tough enough to be in the business. You get one of the tough guys, make them think twice about ever wanting to be in this business. Not a good idea. You don't mix work and shoot.
Right.
I'd wanted Big Show to be the guy out there because I didn't think anybody could move Big Show. Another suggestion was Mark Henry. And then, of course, Kurt Angle. And Kurt volunteered for the spot and wanted to do it. Kurt was adamant. He's not the Kurt Angle of 1996. And we didn't really know what the hell we had on the other side.
This moment from episode 26, Kurt Angle, and much, much more is available in the archives of Something to Wrestle With, Bruce Prichard.
Don't you know that you can save thousands at SaveWithBruce.com? You don't need perfect credit or money out of your pocket either, pal. And thank God, I want to be in my own house, and SaveWithBruce.com can make it happen. Cheaper monthly payments, cash out, debt consolidation, and you can even skip your next 2 house payments. SaveWithBruce.com. You heard me, damn it. SaveWithBruce.com. NMLS 65084. Equal housing lender.